Chapter 2964. As the sword ray fell, blood splattered everywhere, and the scene fell into dead silence. Rong Chi-wei and the others were utterly shocked as they looked at Niet Tian in disbelief, as if they were looking at a monster. They simply could not believe what they had just seen. To them, it was simply impossible. It was not unusual for a first-level demi-saint to kill a second-level demi-saint. The gap between a first-level demi-saint and a second-level demi-saint was not that great in the first place. However, the way Niet Tian killed a second-level demi-saint in a one-sided manner was simply too shocking. He did not draw his sword at all, and merely his sword had killed a second-level demi-saint. Was Niet Tian really just a first-level demi-saint martialist? At that moment, Yuruo and Zhu Chun were also stunned as they looked at Niet Tian in surprise and fear. A few seconds later, Rong Chi-wei and the others came to their senses and involuntarily retreated. I gave you a chance just now, but you didn't cherish it. But at that moment, Niet Tian's cold voice rang out. It's too late to leave now. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As the bone-chilling voice trailed off, several sword rays appeared in the air, accompanied by streaks of blood. Several Rong family martialists fell to the ground, dying in the same way as the previous one, decapitated. Only Rong Chi-wei was left, and he looked at Niet Tian with trembling eyes, his teeth chattering, unable to say a word. You deserve to die. Niet Tian's eyes darkened as he took a step forward. His entire body surged with sword aura, and a massive sword pressure appeared, rolling like the sea and exceptionally terrifying. Rong Chi-wei's face was ashen as he felt the violent pressure, and his eyes were filled with extreme despair. He could not imagine that a first-level demi-saint could unleash such a terrifying sword pressure. At that moment, if Niet Tian were to take a step forward, he would be crushed into minced meat. Bonya, stay your hand. But at that moment, a voice suddenly rang out, and a figure rushed over. It was Feng Shutong. Old Feng, are you going to protect this scum? Niet Tian looked at Feng Shutong and frowned. Let him scram first. Feng Shutong waved his hand, indicating that Rong Chi-wei could scram. Rong Chi-wei felt as if he had been pardoned and ran away in terror. Niet Tian furrowed his brows. It was not appropriate for him to make another move. Thank you, young master. At this moment, Yuruo stood up and walked in front of Niet Tian. It's nothing. Niet Tian smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. Then, Yuruo took out her clothes and put them on. Her frightened expression slowly recovered. TQR1, Niet Tian glanced at the follower called Zhu Chun. The latter's injuries weren't light. He had most likely been injured while protecting his master. Niet Tian helped him heal for a while, then asked Feng Shutong to take out some divine pills for him to consume. After dealing with these two, Niet Tian couldn't help but look at Feng Shutong and ask, Old Feng, why did you stop me from killing that scum? Bonya, do you know the guys from the Rong family? Feng Shutong laughed and raised his brows. Rong family? Niet Tian's brows furrowed, his expression puzzled. He had never heard of the Rong family. You don't know the Rong family? Feng Shutong frowned and asked in shock when he saw Niet Tian's reaction. He hadn't thought that Niet Tian would be in the Sacred Soul region and not know of the Rong family. I don't know. Niet Tian shook his head and said awkwardly, I haven't been in the Sacred Soul region for long, so I don't know much about the major forces in the Sacred Soul region. Feng Shutong looked at Niet Tian and his face darkened. He continued, That's good. This time, a seed of the sacred world has appeared in the Arctic snow mountain. All the major forces in the Sacred Soul region will move upon hearing about it. You will soon know which major forces are in the Sacred Soul region. Old Feng, why don't you introduce them to me first? Niet Tian's lips twitched, and he said with a smile. Sigh. Feng Shutong sighed and said helplessly, All right, this old man will reluctantly tell you. Then, he began to introduce them. There are 10 major forces in the Sacred Soul region. They're known as the 1 sect, 2 academies, 3 families, and 4 dynasties. 1 sect, 2 academies, 3 families, and 4 dynasties. Niet Tian's eyes flashed, and he secretly noted it down. Feng Shutong nodded and continued. The one sect refers to the Nine Mysteries sect. This sect is very mysterious and will not reveal itself under normal circumstances. However, its strength is not to be underestimated. It should be the #1 force in the Sacred Soul region. The two academies refers to the Holy Soul Academy and the Netherworld Academy. These two academies are very powerful. Many powerful cultivators in the Sacred Soul region graduated from these two academies. The three families refers to the three family forces. They are the Mu family, the Rong family, and the Yu family. The four dynasties refers to the four great dynasties of the Sacred Heaven region. They are the Holy Moon dynasty, the Xiantian dynasty, the Wuji dynasty, and the Shunluo dynasty. After listening to Feng Shudong's explanation, Nietian couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He didn't expect that a small Sacred Soul region would have so many powerful forces. Although Nietian didn't know about the existence of the 10 major forces, he had already interacted with many of them. There was no need to mention the Holy Soul Academy. He was now a student of the Holy Soul Academy. Nietian had interacted with the Mu family, the Rong family, and the Yu family. He had completely offended the Mu family and the Rong family. Luckily, Nietian didn't have much conflict with the Yu family. Instead, he owed them a debt of gratitude. After all, he had just saved Yuruo. Nietian guessed that the half-divine array master that appeared previously was that Elder Yu. He should also be from the Yu family. However, he didn't have much conflict with this Elder Yu. At most, there was a small misunderstanding. As for the four dynasties, Nietian already knew two of them, the Holy Moon dynasty and the Xiantian dynasty. He was even with the Princess Royal of the Holy Moon dynasty. Although the Xiantian dynasty was offended by Nietian on the surface, the Xiantian patriarch had an agreement with Nietian. Elder Feng, will the 10 major forces appear when the seed of the sacred world appears? Nietian looked at Feng Shutong and asked with a frown. Not necessarily. Feng Shutong shook his head and said, the Nine Mysteries sect hasn't appeared for a long time. I don't know if they will appear this time. The Wuji dynasty and the Shunluo dynasty are in the middle of a war. They probably won't have time to care about the seed of the sacred world. But the Netherworld Academy will probably come. This academy has a feud with the Holy Soul Academy. There was a war between the two academies. The previous dean of the Netherworld Academy died in the hands of the previous dean of the Holy Soul Academy. Nietian nodded. He didn't expect the Holy Soul Domain to have an academy that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Holy Soul Academy. It seemed like the Holy Soul Domain was far more complicated than Nietian had imagined. He really didn't know what Hua Yiru had planned to let him snatch the seed of the sacred world from the hands of so many powerful forces. Then, Nietian and Feng Shutong chatted as they walked, preparing to leave the Arctic snow mountain. Chapter 2965. The sudden attack made Nietian's eyes narrow, and he reacted quickly. Sword will surge from his body, and the starry sky slash appeared in his hand. He thrust the sword straight at the void. Boom! The next moment, the sword and the blade collided, and the void trembled. Then, the blade and the sword shattered at the same time, turning into a raging wave that wreaked havoc in the air. Nietian could not help but take a few steps back under the impact of the violent force. At the same time, a sharp blade wielder appeared in the sky. His eyes were cold and murderous as he stared at Nietian. Godly blade soul, godly saber soul. Nietian's heart sank as he looked at the man with the saber in front of him. The blade wielder's aura was as vast and vigorous as the sea, and the sword will around him was extremely violent. This person had the strength of a 9th-level demi-saint, and his blade had reached the godly blade soul level. More importantly, this blade wielder was very young. He should be under 10,000 years old. Nietian was very confused. Why did this blade wielder attack him directly? He did not know him at all. Big brother. At that moment, Yuruo looked at the blade wielder and shouted in surprise. Nietian's eyes narrowed, and he finally realized that this blade wielder was Yuruo's big brother. Ruor, what did I tell you? I told you not to follow me. Why didn't you listen? Yu Tonghai's eyes turned cold as he glared at Yuruo. Although he was very angry, It was obvious from his eyes that he loved his sister very much. It was precisely because of this that he was so angry. He only had one sister. If something happened to her, how would he explain it to his father? "Big brother, I know I was wrong," Yu said in a small voice, her face nervous. "Okay," Yu Tonghai replied cold, and then looked at Ju Chun with a vicious look. He growled, "Ju Chun, who gave you the courage to bring the young lady to such a dangerous place?" "Young master, Ju Chun knows his mistake." Ju Chun frowned and knelt down, but there was not much panic on his face. Even though his knees were on the ground, he was still neither servile nor overbearing. "Idiot!" Yu Tonghai roared angrily. Then, he raised his arm and a saber intent whizzed out, attacking Ju Chun. Nye Tian could not help but frown upon seeing this. He took a step forward and summoned a sword intent to block the saber intent. He could tell that Yu Tonghai wanted to leave a scar on Ju Chun's face. As a follower, Ju Chun had failed to protect Yu Ruo well, so this was indeed his fault. However, he had already tried his best. Yu Tonghai had gone too far by using such a method to punish him. Yu Tonghai's face darkened and his cold gaze locked onto Nye Tian. He said in a low voice, "How dare you? I'm teaching my servant a lesson. What does that have to do with you?" "None of my business." Nye Tian frowned slightly and said indifferently, "I just think that Ju Chun has already done his best. You leaving a knife mark on his face is an insult to him. This kind of punishment is too cruel." "Impudent!" Yu Tonghai roared and said coldly. "Who do you think you are? How dare you criticize me? I haven't asked you yet. Why are you with Ro?" Nye Tian frowned and his expression darkened. He had not expected Yu Tonghai to be so unreasonable. He was like a rabid dog that bit whoever he caught. "Big brother, he's our benefactor." Before Nye Tian could speak, Yu Ruo stepped forward and recounted what had just happened. When Yu Tonghai heard Yu Ruo's story, his dark expression finally eased a little. "Big brother, it's all my fault. I forced Ju Chun to bring me here. Please don't punish him," Yu Ruo said carefully when she saw that Yu Tonghai's anger had subsided. "Ju Chun, I'll let you off this time, but remember, this will not happen again," Yu Tonghai said coldly, indicating that Ju Chun could stand up. Then his gaze fell on Nye Tian. His gaze was not friendly as he asked darkly, "Who are you? Do I need to tell you who I am?" Nye Tianling replied coldly. If Yu Tonghai spoke politely, he would, of course, respond politely. However, Yu Tonghai's swaggering attitude made him very uncomfortable. Yu Tonghai looked at Nye Tian, his expression darkening. He said, "Stinking brat, I'm afraid you have ulterior motives for getting close to Roar." When Nye Tian heard this, his expression instantly darkened. If this guy wasn't Yu Ruo's big brother, he would have attacked a long time ago. This person had a bad temper, was ruthless, and was especially petty. If Nye Tian really wanted to do something to Yu Ruo, would the latter still be standing here? "Big brother, don't talk about my benefactor like that." Yu Ruo's expression darkened. It was clear that she could not bear to hear this and was angry. "Oof." Yu Tonghai ignored her. His eyes stared at Nye Tian and said coldly, "Brat, if you don't speak, then it proves that you have a guilty conscience. Speak. What are you trying to do by getting close to her?" Nye Tian frowned and his expression darkened. He did not speak, but this Yu Tonghai was not done. "Do you think that if I wanted to do something to your sister, you would still be able to see her here?" Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and he said coldly, "Brat, I think you've taken a fancy to the power of our Yu family and want to curry favor with the powerful." Yu Tonghai smiled sinisterly and had an arrogant attitude. "Curry favor with the powerful?" Nye Tian frowned even more and said, "You think too highly of yourself. Your Yu family is indeed powerful, but I, Nye Tian, am not a villain who wants to curry favor with the powerful. I only saved Miss Roer because I saw injustice on the road. And to be honest, I really don't think much of Yu family's power." TQR1 said, "Huh?" Yu Tonghai's eyes turned cold when he heard Nye Tian's words. From his point of view, Nye Tian's words were an insult to the Yu family. "If you don't like me, then get lost," Nye Tian said coldly and turned to leave, not bothering to waste words with Yu Tonghai. Yu Ruo'er was so anxious that her face was red, but she did not know what to do. Do you think you can just walk away after insulting the Yu family? At this moment, Yu Tonghai suddenly let out a fierce roar. His entire body surged with saber intent, vigorous and violent. He was actually going to attack Nie Tian. If you want to fight, I'll fight with you. Nie Tian's figure froze for a moment before he suddenly turned around and glared at Yu Tonghai. Do you really think that I'm afraid of you? He said coldly. Yu Tonghai had the strength of a rank 9 demi-saint, and he was also a soul bladesman, which made him very frightening. However, if he were to fight to the death with Nie Tian, the outcome would be uncertain. Moreover, with Nie Tian's experience in tough battles, his chances of winning were very high. Come. Let's fight. Feng Shutong, who was at the side, not only did not try to stop the fight, but he instead chuckled and looked at Nie Tian with a lecherous gaze. He really wanted to see with his own eyes exactly how strong Nie Tian's battle prowess was. Nie Tian's figure moved and leaped into the air, standing opposite Yu Tonghai. The two of them stood in the air, their figures as sharp as swords. A great battle was about to break out. What good show! I've come just in time. However, it was at that moment that a cold voice suddenly spoke. Then, a figure appeared in the void. Chapter 2966. Yu Tonghai's face darkened when he saw that it was Rong Chi-wei. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and his killing intent burst out like a breached dam. Yu Ruo'er had already told him everything, and he was going to look for Rong Chi-wei. He did not expect the latter to show up. Nie Tian looked at Rong Chi-wei and could not help but freeze. He did not expect that Rong Chi-wei would dare to come back. Humph. At this moment, however, Rong Chi-wei wasn't afraid in the slightest. Instead, he let out a cold, arrogant laugh. His vicious eyes swept across Nie Tian and Yu Tonghai as he said in a mocking tone, "It seems that my appearance has disturbed your battle. Rong Chi-wei, you shameless villain. I was on a look for you, but you came to me on your own accord. I'm not Yu Tonghai if I don't kill you today." Yu Tonghai's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Rong Chi-wei. He was clearly furious. Although he was very dissatisfied with Nie Tian, his hatred for Rong Chi-wei was undoubtedly deeper. Umph. Rong Chi-wei smiled cold and said, "Yu Tonghai, did you think that I would come back alone?" As soon as he said that, a dozen martial artists appeared in the void behind him, each of them extremely ferocious and filled with killing intent. "So you found help." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw that, and he smiled faintly. Rong Chi-wei had just barely escaped with his life, and now that he had returned, he was definitely not alone. Then, Nie Tian's divine sense swept over the dozen martial artists of the Rong family, and his face darkened. Among the dozen martial artists of the Rong family, the weakest had the strength of a high-level demi-saint, and there were even a few stage 9 demi-saints. One of them, a middle-aged man with a knife scar on his face, had the strength of a stage 1 demi-saint. Such a lineup was not strong, but it was enough to pose a great threat to Nie Tian and the others. Damn it! Yu Tonghai's face darkened when he saw the dozen martial artists of the Rong family and sensed their aura. He did not expect that Rong Chi-wei had brought so many powerhouses with him. He had left in a hurry to look for Yu Ruo'er, so he did not bring anyone with him. At this moment, he couldn't help but glance at Nie Tian. His gaze was clearly asking for help. Although he felt that Nie Tian's strength was average, he was still a helper. Nie Tian glanced at Yu Tonghai and said cold, "I'll leave the strongest pseudo-saint martial artist to you. Leave the rest to me." Since Yu Tonghai was the young master of the Yu family and a soul blade wielder, it would not be a problem for him to deal with a pseudo-saint as a rank 9 demi-saint. As for the other Rong family martial artists, Nie Tian was not afraid even if they were demi-saints. Yes, Yu Tonghai was stunned for a moment, as if he hadn't expected Nie Tian to say this. When he recovered, he nodded. "Old Feng, I'll leave Lady Ruo'er and the rest to you." Nie Tian looked at Feng Shutong and said lightly. Although Feng Shutong's strength was not much, he had various means to protect Yu Ruo'er and the rest while protecting himself. "No problem." Feng Shutong chuckled, his eyes emitting a blazing light. He did not intend to make a move at the moment, as he was eager to see how powerful Nie Tion's combat ability was. You two think you can stop so many Rong family martial artists with just the two of you? Do you think the Rong family is a bunch of pushovers? Rong Chi smiled cold, his eyes brimming with killing intent as he growled, "Everyone, kill them!" Yes. A dozen Rong family martial artists answered in unison, their voices thunderous and imposing. TQR1 in the next moment, a dozen figures moved at the same time, directly surrounding Nie Tian and Yu Tonghai. Young master of the Yu family, your time has come. At that moment, the scarred martial artist growled and glared at Yu Tonghai with eyes as fierce as a wolf. Then, a black saber appeared in his hand, surging with saber will and imposing aura. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. He did not expect that the scar martial artist was also a saber wielder. Moreover, his realm of saber principles had also reached the legendary saber soul level. Therefore, Yu Tonghai's advantage as a saber wielder was gone. It would be difficult for him to defeat the scarred martial artist. Boom! In the next moment, the scarred martial artist moved. The saber in his hand slashed out wildly. Suddenly, the shadow of the saber was like a mountain cutting across the sky. The void sank, and the sound of the saber resounded in the air. Yu Tonghai's eyes darkened, and the raging sea dragon head saber appeared in his hand. He slashed out angrily, and the sound of a dragon roaring and a tsunami was heard in the air. Boom! Then, the two saber shadows collided and the void shook. Violent and vigorous saber will suddenly surged and wreaked havoc in the space. Although this Yu Tonghai is very arrogant, he's not weak, Nie Tian muttered to himself as the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. He had to admit that he had underestimated Yu Tonghai's strength. The strength of the latter's saber was beyond his expectations. With such strength, even if Yu Tonghai could not defeat the scar martial artist, he would at least be undefeatable. As soon as Nie Tian finished speaking, he moved. With one heavy step, his body flew up into the sky like a dragon. He wanted to attract the attention of all the Rong family martial artists so that the battle between Yu Tonghai and the scar martial artist would not be affected. Boom! 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 In the next moment, more than a dozen Rong clan martial artists shot up into the sky and dashed towards Nie Tian. Good timing! Nie Tian hovered in the air, having gained an advantageous position. The corner of his mouth twitched as his cold eyes locked onto a stage 7 Saint martial artist from the Rong family. Then, the starry sky slash appeared in his hand as he unleashed his sword while in a frenzy. As he thrust his sword forward, the shadow of the sword swooped down like a dragon from the heavens. Ah! The martial artist screamed as his face paled when he saw the shadow of the sword above his head. He did not expect that Nie Tian would suddenly stop and even attack first. Boom! The martial artist did not have time to react. The moment the shadow of the sword fell, he was swallowed up, and not even his bones were left. The other warriors of the Rong family couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when they saw this scene. Their faces were filled with terror. They clearly did not expect that the silver-haired martial artist, who was merely a rank 1 demi-saint, would have such formidable combat ability. Killing a rank 7 demi-saint with a single strike meant that his combat ability was comparable to that of a rank 9 demi-saint. Be careful. That silver-haired brat's ability is strange. Don't be careless. Rong Chi shouted from below to warn the Rong family martial artists. He had already witnessed Nie Tian's strength with his own eyes, which was why he was not too surprised that Nie Tian had killed a rank 7 demi-saint in an instant. However, there was a faint worry in his heart. He had a feeling that Nie Tian's combat ability was stronger than what he saw. Moreover, the dozen Rong family martial artists might not be a match for Nie Tian even if they joined forces. This worry caused his expression to become unsightly. But in the very next moment, his eyes flickered and appeared extremely vicious and cold. He suddenly turned around and locked his gaze on Feng Shatong and the others. Chapter 2967. Feng Shatong did not panic at all when he saw Rong Chi looking at him. Instead, he laughed and said, "Rong brat, It's all thanks to this old man that you're still alive. You're not going to bite the hand that feeds you and attack me, are you? Previously, Tian was about to kill Rong Chi-wei, but Feng Shutong stopped him all of a sudden, which allowed Rong Chi-wei to live until now. Now, Rong Chi-wei actually wanted to attack Feng Shutong. If this was not biting the hand that feeds him, what else could it be? Old thing, you asked that brat to let me go because you're afraid of the power of the Rong family. Rong Chi-wei smiled coldly and said, I'll kill you right now. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being that brat's friend. As he spoke, Rong Chi-wei took a step forward and released his aura in a frenzy. It was extremely violent and terrifying. TQR won the corner of Feng Shutong's mouth twitched. He had a playful look on his face. It seemed that he had released the wrong person when he asked Tian to let Rong Chi-wei go. However, he was certainly not afraid of Rong Chi-wei. Even if he only had the strength of a first-level demi-saint, he still had hundreds and thousands of ways to kill Rong Chi-wei. At this moment, Rong Chi-wei let out a strange cry. His silhouette flickered as he slammed his palm downwards. A majestic palm energy surged out, condensing into a shadow of a palm that pressed down on Feng Shutong like a mountain. Watch out, senior! Yu Ruotar screamed as she saw the scene. Her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. However, Feng Shutong was not nervous at all. Instead, he had a strange smile on his face. In the next moment, a scroll appeared in his hand, and he opened it. Suddenly, the terrifying power of a formation surged out. Endless runes of the formation flowed wildly in the void and instantly formed a large formation. Bang! Then, the terrifying palm shadow fell and bombarded the large formation. A muffled sound was heard in the air as the palm shadow collapsed. Rong Chi-wei's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw that, and his face turned gloomy. He did not expect that Feng Shutong would have a formation scroll on him. Moreover, he felt that the aura of this array formation was a little strange. It actually made him feel a little uneasy. Little bastard from the Rong clan, of all things you shouldn't have done, you shouldn't have made a move against me. At that moment, Feng Shutong let out a strange laugh, after which he took a step forward and something strange happened. The runes of the array formation in the space suddenly started to circulate, instantly burning in the air. Then, it enveloped Feng Shutong's body, condensing into an armor of raging flames. What's going on? Rong Chi-wei had never seen such a scene and couldn't help but cry out in shock. Little bastard, die for me. Immediately after, Feng Shutong sneered. He extended his palm, and a sword of flames appeared in his hand. He raised his hand, and a sharp sword of flames whizzed through the air. Swoosh! Rong Chi-wei's gaze shook, and his figure instantly retreated. However, he was still a step too late, and one of his arms was actually directly severed by the flaming blades. Blood gushed out and dyed half of his body red. Rong Chi-wei howled in pain, and his voice resounded through the sky. Seventh young master. The Rong clan's martial artists heard Rong Chi-wei scream and immediately turn around. What they saw made their expressions change. That scrawny old man only had the strength of a first-level demi-saint. How could he have injured Rong Chi-wei so badly? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and save me. Rong Chi-wei endured the pain and howled in a strange voice. The Rong clan's martial artists came to their senses and simultaneously moved towards Rong Chi-wei. However, at that moment, Feng Shutong stopped attacking. Moreover, the armor of flames around his body had also disappeared. He raised his head to look at Tian and said faintly, Little Nya, I'll leave the rest to you. He did not want to fight with the Rong clan's martial artists. Instead, he wanted to see how strong Tian's combat ability was. Seventh young master, are you all right? A group of Rong clan's martial artists surrounded Rong Chi-wei and asked nervously. Rong Chi-wei's eyes were crimson and fierce like a ferocious beast. He pointed at Feng Shutong and roared, Kill him! Yes. A dozen Rong clan's martial artists answered in unison. Their ferocious eyes immediately locked onto Feng Shutong. Boom! However, at that moment, the void high above suddenly trembled. Then, an extremely violent sword shadow appeared. It was tens of thousands of meters long, and it pressed down on the void with a roar. The Roan clan's martial artists felt that something was wrong. They immediately raised their heads and reacted in an instant. They all attacked in unison, and a series of violent attacks were launched towards the sword shadow. Bang, bang, bang. Muffled sounds of explosions were heard in the void. However, the sword shadow's aura was extremely strong, and it was not shattered. Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and several weaker Roan clan's martial artists were devoured by the sword shadow and died tragically. Even the stronger Roan clan's martial artists were sent flying by the impact of the sword shadow, leaving bloody trails in the air. Nye Tian, your combat ability is indeed terrifying. Feng Shutong's small eyes could not help but twinkle when he saw that, and he exclaimed in shock. He had already guessed that Nye Tian's combat ability was absolutely amazing, and it was far from being comparable to a martial artist of the same level. However, he did not expect that Nye Tian's combat ability was actually so terrifying. At that moment, Nye Tian stepped out and stood coldly in the air. His eyes were deep and murderous. He had already used all his strength in that sword attack just now. Although this sword attack could not kill all the Roan clan's martial artists, it directly defeated the other party. In the next moment, Nye Tian's eyes turned and locked onto Rong Chi-wei. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he said coldly, Rong Chi-wei, you just survived, but you don't know how to cherish it. This time, no one can save you. When Rong Chi-wei was locked onto by Nye Tian's gaze, his body trembled in fear, and he actually had the intention to retreat. He never dreamed that Nye Tian's combat ability would be so terrifying. At that moment, Nye Tian's figure moved at extreme speed. Like a shocking rainbow, he directly attacked Rong Chi-wei. Nye Tian knew that Rong Chi-wei's strength was not strong, but his status was very high. If Rong Chi-wei was killed, then the Roan clan's martial artists would be in chaos. Boom! Nye Tian was in the air, and sword intent surged outside his body. He slashed out with his sword, and the sword shadow broke through the air and blasted towards Rong Chi-wei. Save me! In an instant, Rong Chi-wei felt the aura of death approaching. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and he screamed. Seventh young master. When the surrounding Roan clan's martial artists saw this scene, their faces instantly became panicked. However, at this time, it was too late for them to make a move. Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and a violent power instantly erupted. The sword light shone brightly, blooming in the void, and it was incomparably dazzling. However, under this dazzling brilliance, there was the most terrifying killing intent. Rong Chi-wei's eyes instantly widened. He wanted to resist, but he was unable to do so. Chapter 2968. Rong Chi-wei was killed by Nye Tian with a single slash. The tragic scene made all the Rong family martial artists stiffen and speechless. Nye Tian was simply too ferocious. He had killed Rong Chi-wei just like that. Feng Shutong could not help but frown when he saw that. Not only did Nye Tian have terrifying combat ability, but he was also very talented in combat. His killing of Rong Chi-wei with a single slash was obviously to intimidate the Rong family martial artists. On the other side, Yuruo and Juchun were also dumbfounded. Die all of you! At that moment, Nye Tian moved again. His lips curled into a cold smile as the astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he moved at top speed. Boom! 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 In the void, several sword shadows appeared, violent and sharp. Bang! 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 Every time the sword shadow landed, there would be a patch of bloody light. Nye Tian's technique was swift and fierce as he killed a Rong family martial artist with a single slash. Most of the Rong family martial artists were still in shock over Rong Chi-wei's death and did not even have the chance to fight back before they were killed by Nye Tian. Nye Tian killed Rong Chi-wei first because he wanted to achieve such an effect. In fact, if the dozen Rong family martial artists joined forces, they would be a great threat to him. After all, they were all high-level demi-saint powerhouses, and there were even a few rank 9 demi-saints among them. Run! In the blink of an eye, only 2 rank 9 demi-saints were left out of the dozen Rome family martial artists. They were completely scared out of their wits, and when they came to their senses, they moved and fled. You think you can escape? Nie Tianling smiled coldly. His figure swept through the air, and 2 sword shadows whizzed up, leaving 2 streaks of blood wherever they passed. 2 rank 9 demi-saint martial artists died tragically. In fact, it would not have been easy for Nie Tian to kill either of them if they were to fight head-on. They might even have had the chance to kill Nie Tian if they had joined forces. Unfortunately, they were scared out of their wits and only cared about running away. The moment they fled, they were destined to die a horrible death. In a battle between martial artists, besides strength, combat talent, and combat experience, momentum was also very important. How could they have a chance to win if they were afraid from the start? Nie Tian killed more than 10 Rong clan cultivators. Then he shifted his gaze and looked at the battle in another part of the sky. At this time, Yu Tonghai and the scar-faced man were fighting fiercely. Saber light flickered high up in the sky. A violent saber intent rushed into the void and roared. Boom! Right at this moment, the 2 blade shadows clashed head-on. The space trembled violently as a terrifying force spread out in all directions. The saber intent surged wildly, instantly submerging the figures of Yu Tonghai and the scarred martial artist. When Nie Tian saw this scene, his heart couldn't help but sink, and he faintly had a bad premonition. That scarred martial artist was no ordinary individual. Although his ability was just a little higher than Yu Tonghai's, it was the difference between a demi-saint and a pseudo-saint. TQR1 in a head-on clash, Yu Tonghai's chances of winning were not high. With that thought in mind, Nie Tian's figure moved, charging towards the violent waves of saber intent high up in the sky. Die! That was when a low and sinister voice rang out. Then, a violent blade shadow appeared in the turbid void, cutting through the turbid waves and blasting towards a figure. Boom! Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly at the sight, and he slashed out with the starry heavenly slash in his hand, the sword's shadow howling as it blasted towards the void. Boom! In the very next moment, the blade shadow and the sword shadow collided. Space trembled, and the aura of the blade and sword instantly exploded, turning into rolling waves that rushed into the void. Then, Nie Tian's figure arrived beside a blood-colored figure. It's you. The blood-colored figure trembled slightly, and when he saw that it was Nie Tian, his eyes trembled uncontrollably. That blood-colored figure was Yu Tonghai. He had been gravely injured in the battle against the scarred martial artist. If it weren't for Nie Tian's sword, he would have been killed by the scarred martial artist. At that moment, the scarred martial artist looked at Nie Tian, and his expression couldn't help but change as he exclaimed in surprise, Huh. He had been so focused on the battle just now that he didn't know that Rong Chi-wei and the others had already died. Your 7th young master is already dead. Why did he get lost? Nie Tian suddenly turned around and said coldly to the scarred martial artist. The scarred martial artist was very strong. If he fought with him, Nie Tian might not be able to gain the upper hand. Boy, you killed the 7th young master of the Rong family. The Rong family will not let you off. The scarred martial artist's face was extremely gloomy, and he said cold words. Then, his figure moved, and he directly left. He had consumed too much energy in the battle with Yu Tonghai, and he felt that Nie Tian's sword attack just now was not weaker than Yu Tonghai's. He didn't have full confidence, so he didn't want to get entangled with Nie Tian. Nie Tian looked at the scarred martial artist's figure, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He murmured, I'll wait for the Rong family to find me. Are you all right? Then, Nie Tian looked at Yu Tonghai and asked with a frown. No, I'm fine. Yu Tonghai looked embarrassed. He was very hesitant, but in the end, he still said, Thank you for just now. Of course, he knew that if it weren't for Nie Tian's sword, he would have died at the hands of the scarred martial artist. I saved you not because you are from the Yu family. I just feel that you don't deserve to die. That's all, Nie Tian said coldly as he glanced at Yu Tonghai. Yu Tonghai's expression was ugly. He said, What happened just now was my fault. Please forgive me. Let's go. Nye Tian didn't say anything else and was ready to leave immediately. Yu Tonghai looked at Nye Tian in utter shock. He never imagined that Nye Tian would be so frightening. He had a feeling that if he had fought Nye Tian just now, he would have been the one who would have lost. He was already a very frightening being among rank 9 demi-saints. But Nye Tian was only a rank 1 demi-saint, and yet his combat ability was stronger than his own. It was truly frightening. Then, Nye Tian accompanied Yu Tonghai and the others to the territory controlled by the Yu family. He only left after making sure that Yu Tonghai and the others were safe. As Nye Tian bid his farewells, Yu Tonghai walked up to him and said with a solemn tone, "Brother Nye, what happened just now was all my fault. If you need my help in the future, I'll go through water and tread on fire for you. I'll die 1,000 deaths for you. You're too kind, brother Yu." Nye Tian smiled faintly, his expression calm. Since Yu Tonghai was apologizing so sincerely, he would appear petty if he didn't accept it. With that, Nye Tian didn't stay any longer and immediately turned to leave. It's hard to imagine that there is such a freakish martial artist in this world. And here I was boasting about my talent, but compared to him, I'm nothing but trash. Yu Tonghai smiled bitterly as he looked at Nye Tian's back. Not only had Nye Tian's performance shocked him, but had also smashed his arrogance to the point where it was almost completely covered in bruises. He had considered himself a martial arts genius before, but it was only in front of Nye Tian that he realized that his talent was not worth mentioning at all. More importantly, Nye Tian's calmness had affected him greatly. Chapter 2969. After bidding farewell to the Yu siblings, Nye Tian prepared to leave the Arctic Snow Mountain. He had already been at the Arctic Snow Mountain for a few days. In a while, the Arctic Snow Mountain would open, and his strength had increased too much. He needed some time to stabilize his realm. Feng Shudong was already in the 9 extremes. He should be extracting holy liquid from the holy whirlpool. Nye Tian, the cultivation environment here is much better than outside. Why don't you find a secluded place and cultivate for a few days? When your realm is completely stabilized, you can leave then. Fat Cat's voice sounded and said to Nye Tian, "All right." Nye Tian's gaze focused, and he agreed with Fat Cat's suggestion. There were still 10 days before the Arctic Snow Mountain opened. He only needed to leave before the mountain opened. After that, Nye Tian found a remote mountain valley and carefully examined the surroundings. After confirming that there were no abnormalities in the surroundings, he sat down cross-legged and started to practice cultivation. In the blink of an eye, 10 days passed. Nye Tian walked out of the mountain valley. At this moment, his aura was much stronger than before. He was abnormally sharp, like an unsheathed sword. The Arctic Snow Mountain is about to open. I must leave as soon as possible. Nye Tian murmured and walked down the mountain. Soon, he reached the outskirts of the Arctic Snow Mountain and was about to leave. At this time, dozens of figures appeared in the distance. It's people from Saint Soul Academy. Nye Tian saw from afar that 3 of the faces were very familiar. They were the teachers of Saint Soul Academy, Bai Ruoju, Liang Zhen, and Yu Lian. These 3 teachers had forced Jun Aoqing to be her disciple when Nye Tian first entered Saint Soul Academy. So Nye Tian remembered them. And Bai Ruoju, whom Nye Tian had interacted with a few times, had a deeper impression of her. Clearly, Bai Ruoju and the others had received orders from the academy to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain to scout. Nye Tian. At this time, Bai Ruoju also discovered Nye Tian and shouted in pleasant surprise. She had a lot of interactions with Nye Tian, and Nye Tian always left a very deep impression on her. So, she had a very good impression of Nye Tian. However, Liang Zhen and Yu Lian, who were beside her, had gloomy expressions and unfriendly gazes. "Teacher Bai, you've also come to the Arctic Snow Mountain." Nye Tian quickly walked over and smiled faintly at Bai Ruoju. As for Liang Zhen and Yu Lian, he directly chose to ignore them. Nye Tian. Bai Ruoju observed Nye Tian from a close distance and suddenly discovered something. Her delicate face suddenly stiffened, and she was stunned. Her mouth opened wide, but no sound came out. How is this possible? Beside her, Liang Zhen and Yu Lian's expressions changed at the same time as they cried out with trembling eyes. The three of them had simultaneously sensed Nie Tian's ability, a level 1 demi-saint. Such ability was originally very common, and any random disciple of the Holy Soul Academy would have the ability of a demi-saint. But for a level 1 demi-saint to appear on Nie Tian's body was very frightening. Bai Ruozhu clearly remembered that when Nie Tian went to the Dark Moon Empire as a personal escort, he was only at the pinnacle of divine tier. How much time had passed, and yet Nie Tian's ability had actually become a level 1 demi-saint. It was truly unbelievable. Liang Zhen and Yu Lian were equally shocked in their hearts. When they had first met Nie Tian, the latter was truly weak. And now, Nie Tian had actually become a level 1 demi-saint. It was truly frightening. "Teacher Bai, are you all right?" Seeing Bai Ruozhu's horrified expression, Nie Tian had already guessed what the latter was thinking. However, he still faintly smiled and asked, "TQR 1-inch Nie Tian, how did you become so powerful?" Bai Ruozhu asked in surprise as she came to her senses. Halfway through her sentence, she could not help but gulp. "I was quite lucky. I absorbed some energy, which is why my ability improved a little faster." Nie Tian smiled faintly and answered half-truthfully. He had indeed relied on absorbing the energy of the blood yuan of the Saint Spirit to improve his ability so quickly. Still, Bai Ruozhu would never have guessed that Nie Tian had obtained the blood yuan of the Saint Spirit during his training in the Holy Soul Valley. "That's—" Liang Zhen and Yu Lian inhaled sharply at the same time and looked at each other, their astonishment written all over their faces. Nie Tian's improvement in ability was simply too shocking and incomprehensible. Even Nie Fenghua, who was known as the #1 genius of the Holy Soul Academy all those years ago, was a far cry from Nie Tian. It must be said that this pair of father and son were each more monstrous than the other. Liang Zhen and Yu Lian even felt that Nie Tian had some dogshit luck and merged with the inheritance of a saint. "Nie Tian, you enter the Arctic Snow Mountain alone?" At this time, Bai Ruozhu suddenly thought of something and looked at Nie Tian with a shocked expression. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said indifferently, "I was helping teacher Hua Yiru find something." Bai Ruozhu's face froze again when she saw Nie Tian being so calm. It seemed that Nie Tian did not know how dangerous the Arctic Snow Mountain was. The factions that had entered the Arctic Snow Mountain ahead of time were not just the Holy Soul Academy. There were other factions. If they encountered other factions, it would be a battle of life and death. She really did not know how Nie Tian had survived in the Arctic Snow Mountain. "Nie Tian, did you get permission from the Academy to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain?" At this time, Liang Zhen's expression suddenly darkened as he asked coldly, "What does it have to do with you whether I got permission from the Academy or not?" Nie Tian glanced at Liang Zhen and replied with a cold expression, "You?" Liang Zhen's eyes darkened as he suddenly felt a tightness in his chest, as if someone was pressing down on him with a boulder weighing tens of thousands of kilograms. He did not think that Nie Tian would be so arrogant and dare to speak to him like this. He was a teacher of the Academy after all. Wasn't this a slap to his face in front of so many people? Liang Zhen. Yu Lian was afraid that Liang Zhen would explode and secretly pulled him back. "Nie Tian, how dare you speak to teacher Liang like this? You have no respect for your elders." At that moment, a man stepped out from behind Liang Zhen and shouted at Nie Tian with a cold look in his eyes. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the other party. It was a rank 5 demi-saint martialist, probably an inner yard disciple. "What does what I say have to do with you?" Then Nie Tianling laughed and said, "You jumped out in such a hurry. Are you trying to please someone?" "Insolence." The person's face reddened as he growled, "You are just an outer yard disciple. How dare you disrespect a teacher? You are challenging the rules of the Holy Soul Academy." "Teacher?" Nie Tian laughed, then glanced at Liang Zhen and said coldly, "He is your teacher, not mine. When he attacked me, did he ever think of himself as a teacher? He doesn't even think of himself as a teacher, so why should I treat him as one?" When Liang Zhen heard Nietion's words, he could not help but blush, and his expression was uglier than if he had eaten shit. Nietion's insolence was beyond his expectations. If he had known earlier, he would never have spoken to Nietion. Chapter 2970. The moment the disciple said that, everyone turned silent. Liang Zhen's expression couldn't help but darken as he looked at the disciple in front of him. He didn't say anything for a long time. It was truly unsuitable for him to make this disciple fight in this sort of situation. Although Nietion was a bit cocky, he didn't do anything wrong. What's more, this disciple was an inner courtyard disciple. Attacking an outer courtyard disciple was against Saint Soul Academy's rules. At that moment, the expressions of the several tens of disciples on the side changed. The disciple who stood out was called Yi Zichen. He had always wanted to become Liang Zhen's disciple, but was rejected by Liang Zhen. The reason why he was so proactive was too obvious. "Student, back down." At that moment, Bairaju spoke up. She frowned. "No matter if Nietion is right or wrong, it definitely isn't your turn to make a move." Nietion looked at Yi Zichen without saying anything. His gaze was cold and filled with disdain. The reason he didn't want to make a move wasn't because he was afraid of Yi Zichen. He just felt like he shouldn't waste time on an idiot. "Traitor's son, coward." Yi Zichen looked at Nietion, then suddenly transmitted his voice to the latter and cursed. Nietion's expression instantly changed. His pupils constricted, and a murderous look appeared in his eyes. He didn't want to make a move, but Yi Zichen actually forced him to. He could endure it if Yi Zichen only cursed him, but he couldn't endure Yi Zichen calling his father a traitor. "Fine," Nietion roared, then pointed at Yi Zichen. "Since you want to die, then I'll grant your wish." Everyone's expression couldn't help but change when they heard Nietion's words, while their gazes turned weird. Nietion didn't say anything just now. Why did he suddenly get angry? "Nietion, you don't have to." Bairaju was stunned for a moment, then looked towards Nietion. She wanted to say something, but was interrupted by the latter. "Teacher Bai, can I kill him?" Nietion waved his hand and asked Bairaju directly. About this, Bairaju's expression stiffened. She didn't know why Nietion's gaze suddenly became so fierce. "What? You traitor's son, do you still want to fight to the death with me?" Yi Zichen smiled coldly with a provocative look. His attitude was so arrogant that it seemed as if he was born in his mother's womb. "So what if it's a fight to the death?" Nietionling sneered and growled in response. Both Bairaju and Liang Zhen's expressions darkened. They didn't want to see Nietion and Yi Zichen fight to the death. "Nietion, Yi Zichen, if you really want to fight, then spar casually. You definitely can't kill each other." At that moment, Yu Lian, who had been silent all along, spoke up with a sullen expression. His eyes flickered, and there was a sinister smile in his eyes. He was eager to see how powerful Nietion's current battle prowess was. Bairaju and Liang Zhen's expressions changed, but they finally nodded. With the current situation, it was already very difficult to stop this battle. It would be fine as long as no lives were lost. They're really going to fight. Everyone backed up one after another. Many people's eyes began to burn with passion, paying close attention to this battle. Although Nietion was only an outer courtyard disciple, his name had already spread throughout the entire Holy Soul Academy. Most people wanted to see with their own eyes just how strong the son of Holy Soul Academy's greatest traitor was. "Nietion, you asked for it." Yi Zichen smiled coldly, while a cold light flashed in his eyes. At that moment, he did not treat Nietion as an opponent. Instead, he treated Nietion as a pebble for him to climb up. As long as he injured Nietion and helped Liang Zhen get back at him, then Liang Zhen would definitely take him in as his personal disciple. "I won't kill you, but I'll let you know what it means to live a life worse than death." Nietion twitched his mouth and spoke coldly. His gaze was as cold as ice, while a bone-chilling gloominess seeped out. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel shocked when he saw Nietion's gaze, while fear surfaced in his eyes. When he was stared at by Nietion, he actually felt like he was a little lamb, while Nietion was a wolf. When the others looked at Nietion, they couldn't help but tremble when they noticed Nietion's gaze. TQR1, they had rarely seen such a fierce gaze. It was as terrifying as that of a ferocious beast. Damn, brat, you're too cocky. At that moment, Yi Zichen calmed down, let out a low roar, and flashed forward, punching out. A ball of flames appeared in the air, which instantly exploded and transformed into a terrifying, blazing fist that shot towards Nye Tian. Oh no! Bai Ruaju's eyes couldn't help but flicker when she saw that. Yi Zichen was a demi-saint expert, while Nye Tian was only a demi-saint. Yi Zichen used his full strength, so Nye Tian should be able to block it. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched coldly as he sensed the aura of the flames in the air. He said coldly, "Your first punch will be your last." With that, Yi Zichen's body trembled, and a berserk sword aura soared into the sky, while a terrifying sword intent surged through the air. Everyone's eyes trembled at this moment. They were completely shocked. None of them expected Nye Tian to be able to instantly unleash such a terrifying sword aura. However, the truly shocking scene had yet to come. Rumble. In the next moment, the fiery fist descended, but was blocked by Nye Tian's sword momentum. Then, the starlight heavenly slash appeared in Nye Tian's hand, which he stabbed out casually. It was a very normal movement, but it contained a terrifying aura. Ugh! A beam of sword light whistled through the air, its aura sharp to the extreme. Before Yi Zichen could even react, it pierced right through his shoulder. Yi Zichen suddenly realized something was wrong. His face instantly turned as white as a sheet of paper. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, his body swayed. Instantly, streaks of blood shot out from his body, instantly turning him into a man of blood. The shocking scene caused everyone to fall into a deathly silence. Everyone looked at Yi Zichen, who was covered in blood, and their shock was perfectly displayed on their faces. Nye Tian's sword intent is so strong. His control over is simply superb. Bai Ruaju was the first to react, and exclaimed with a dazed look in her eyes. Nye Tian's sword had pierced through Yi Zichen's body, and the sword intent had seeped into his body, directly shattering all of his meridians, including his 9 energy meridians. Although Yi Zichen was still alive, he was now a piece of trash that was worse than even a normal person. A normal person's meridians were at least intact, but all of Yi Zichen's meridians were shattered. Before Nye Tian attacked, he said that he wouldn't kill Yi Zichen, but he would let Yi Zichen know what it meant to be worse than death. Turning Yi Zichen into a cripple with a single strike was indeed worse than death for a martial artist. This time, Nye Tian was truly enraged. Yi Zichen shouldn't have called Nye Fenghua a traitor. Nye Tian, you're too vicious. At that moment, Liang Zhen finally reacted. His eyes blazed with rage as he roared, "No matter what, Yi Zichen is still your fellow disciple. How could you be so vicious?" Nye Tian looked at Liang Zhen and laughed coldly. "If he was stronger than me, then I'm afraid I would have ended up the same way. What's more, he asked for it." Asked for it. Just as he said that, a person stood out from behind Liang Zhen. A pair of cold eyes shone with a cold light as he stared at Nye Tian and said coldly, "I also want to ask for it. I wonder if Nye Tian can help me?" Nye Tian's heart couldn't help but tremble when he saw that person. He felt an extremely terrifying killing intent from that person. However, that person hid this killing intent very well. There was practically no trace of it. Chapter 2971. When Nye Tian looked at the warrior behind Liang Zhen, he felt an extremely terrifying killing intent. The killing intent was not overbearing. Instead, it was extremely restrained. However, it contained a heart-chilling coldness. The chilling killing intent contained a bone-chilling coldness. It was terrifyingly sharp. However, what terrified Nye Tian the most was not the killing intent, but the warrior who released it. The fact that the person was able to conceal his killing intent so perfectly already proved his identity. He was an assassin. Only an assassin, and a top-notch one at that, could conceal his killing intent to such a degree. What's more, this person directly stood out and provoked Nye Tian. It was clear that he came for Nye Tian. Luo Qi. At that moment, Bairaju's expression darkened when she saw the warrior. What do you want to do? At this moment, the others also looked at this warrior and couldn't help but discuss. It's actually Luo Qi. Is he going to make a move? Luo Qi is one of the top 10 experts of the inner court. If he makes a move, then there's no way Nie Tian can match him. So strange, Luo Qi usually keeps a very low profile. Why did he suddenly stand out today? It must be because Nie Tian attacked too viciously, so Luo Qi doesn't like it. So the warrior was called Luo Qi. He was one of the top 10 experts in the inner court and was extremely strong. However, Luo Qi usually kept a low profile and never fought with others. Everyone couldn't help but find it strange that he suddenly stood out today. Everyone felt that it must be because Nie Tian attacked Yi Zichen too viciously and angered a taciturn person like Luo Qi. Teacher, this person attacked so viciously. I can't stand it when he did this to a fellow disciple. Luo Qi's gaze darkened as he looked towards Bairuoju with a righteous attitude. Aside from being one of the top 10 experts of the inner court, he was also Bairuoju's personal disciple. What's more, Bairuoju favored him greatly. Bairuoju frowned. She seemed to have noticed something, causing her expression to stiffen. She felt a very strange aura from Luo Qi's body, but when she wanted to carefully sense this aura, it strangely disappeared. Furthermore, she felt that this direct disciple of hers was acting a little strange today, but she couldn't pinpoint what exactly was strange about him. Based on her understanding of Roche, it was impossible for the latter to step forward at this time. What is wrong with Roche today? Teacher, please allow me to teach this person a lesson. Then Roche bowed slightly. Although his expression was respectful, his eyes were shining with a strange light. QL 11-inch Luo Qi, stand down. Bairuoju's eyebrows furrowed. She couldn't help but feel a bit angry. Teacher, please allow me to make a move. Luo Qi's face darkened slightly, but he did not retreat. Instead, he spoke again. Bairuoju's charming face stiffened, and the doubts in her heart grew heavier. Luo Qi was usually very respectful to her, but today he actually dared to disobey her. Was this person in front of her really the disciple she favored the most? Nie Tian, this kid with the surname Luo is a little strange. You should exchange a few blows with him. I need to properly sense his aura. At this moment, the fat cat's voice suddenly rang out and said to Nie Tian, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he nodded in agreement. He also felt an unusual aura from Luo Qi's body. That aura actually made his god fiend, nascent embryo, a little restless. At this moment, Liang Zhen, Yu Lian, and the other disciples all locked their gazes on the master-disciple pair, Bairuoju and Luo Qi. Luo Qi directly collided with Bairuoju. This was something that no one had expected. Luo Qi, I'll say it one more time. Stand down. Bairuoju was really a little angry as she spoke in a cold voice. However, Luo Qi did not move. Evidently, he had no intention of backing down. Bairuoju's expression turned ugly. She never dreamed that Luo Qi, the most obedient and most gentle disciple, would dare to disobey her in front of so many people. Teacher Bai. However, at this moment, Nie Tian suddenly spoke. He faintly smiled and said, Since senior brother Luo wants to teach me a lesson, how can I disappoint him? If I continue to cower from a fight, wouldn't people think that I'm a coward? Nie Tian, do you really dare to fight me? Luo Qi suddenly raised his head when he heard Nie Tian's words. His eyes revealed a strange light that flashed for a moment. However, Bairuoju still noticed it in that instant. How is this possible? Why is there a hint of hostility in Luo Qi's eyes? Bairuoju exclaimed in her heart. She almost suspected that she had seen wrongly. However, the scene just now had a huge impact on her. It was impossible for her to have seen wrongly. If senior brother Luo wants to fight, then I'll naturally accompany you. Nie Tian also noticed the abnormality in Luo Qi's body and said with a faint smile. When everyone saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but burn with passion. They were ready to watch a good show. Nie Tian really has guts. He actually dared to fight Luo Qi. Perhaps Nie Tian really does have the strength to fight. Didn't you see how he crippled Yi Zichen's sword? It was a complete suppression. Impossible. Luo Qi is an expert in the top 10 of the inner courtyard. He has already reached the 9th level of the demi-saint level. He will probably break through to the false saint level soon. No matter how heaven-defying Ye Tian is, he is only a first-level demi-saint. How could he be Luo Qi's match? As everyone spoke, their gazes towards Nye Tian turned cold and playful. They really wanted to see the scene of Nye Tian being defeated. That scene would definitely be very satisfying. Very good. Luo Qi smiled cold. Luo Qi laughed coldly, then said loudly, I will only make one move. After that, regardless of whether you live or die, Yi Zichen's matter will end here. Sure. Nye Tian smiled faintly and agreed without hesitation. Bairuoju was stunned for a long time before she reacted. However, it was already too late for her to interfere. With that, both Nye Tian and Luo Qi soared into the sky at the same time and faced off against each other. I hope nothing happens. Bairuoju looked up at the two figures. She knew that there was no turning back, so she could only hope that nothing happened. On the other hand, Liang Zhen and Yu Lian's eyes burned with passion. They did not know what was going on with Luo Qi today, but they really wanted to see the scene of Nye Tian's crushing defeat. High up in the sky, Nye Tian's entire body was covered in surging sword intent. His sword momentum was accumulating, making him look like a sharp sword. On the other hand, Luo Qi's expression was dark. He had a strange smile on his face, while an evil aura surged in his eyes. At that moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded out, Nye Tian, go all out. Don't hold back. This sovereign wants you to force him to use his true strength. Nye Tian frowned, then nodded. He was very curious about what exactly Fat Cat found on Luo Qi. Boom! With that, Nye Tian's body trembled. A powerful sword aura soared into the sky, as if it was going to tear the heavens and earth apart. Luo Qi's gaze couldn't help but focus when he sensed Nye Tian's aura. He did not expect Nye Tian to be so strong. However, his expression changed in the next moment, and a chilling, killing intent surged in his eyes. At this moment, a layer of strange, evil aura appeared around his body. It was like a black rune that circulated around his body. Chapter 2972. Soul Leader. Nye Tian's expression changed when he heard Fat Cat's voice. The Soul Eater must be extraordinary to be able to make Fat Cat panic. Die! At that moment, Luo Qi's eyes flashed with coldness. He roared and slammed his hand out, causing the void to sink. Boom! In the next moment, a cluster of flames appeared in the sky and exploded into a huge flaming hand, which was wreathed in raging flames, as if it were going to burn heaven and earth into nothingness. Crushing the void, it charged madly towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes darkened when he saw the giant flaming hand. He saw that there was a layer of strange black runes flowing outside the flames of the giant flaming hand. Upon closer inspection, the black runes were actually tiny black skulls that exuded an extremely evil aura. Proud sword technique, forbidden third style, sky-devouring blood. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and the sword intent around him surged to its peak. His blood aura burst forth and merged with his sword intent, stimulating the might of the God Devil sword intent to its limit. Boom! The next moment, he stabbed out with his sword. The sword will condensed in the air, and the space sank when the shadow of the sword appeared. How terrifying! At that moment, everyone's expression changed. The shock in their hearts had reached an extreme level. It was hard to imagine that Nye Tian, who was only a first-stage demi-saint, could explode with such terrifying power in an instant. Nye Tian was too terrifying. The expressions of Bairuoju, Liang Zhen, and Yu Lian froze as well. They were all third-stage pseudo-saints, but when they felt the aura of the blood-red sword shadow in the void, they felt a hint of pressure and threat. How could Nye Tian's sword will be so terrifying? Bairuoju's heart trembled. She was worried that Nye Tian would be injured by Luo Qi. But at that moment, she knew that her worry was unnecessary. The one she should be worried about was Luo Qi. Luo Qi felt the surging sword pressure in the sky and could not help but narrow his eyes. At this moment, he had to admit that he had greatly underestimated Nie Tian's strength. Boom! In the next moment, the blood-colored sword shadow collided with the giant flaming hand. The space suddenly trembled, and the space within tens of thousands of meters was filled with surging sword intent and violent flames. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying waves continued to attack, and Nie Tian and Luo Qi's figures were instantly submerged. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A series of ear-piercing rumbling sounds came from the sky. The eyes of the crowd trembled, not daring to be distracted at all. No one had expected Nie Tian and Luo Qi to fight to such an extent with just a single move. Rumble. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, a thunderous sound rang out, followed by countless explosions in the air. The huge flaming hand was actually torn apart by the sword shadows. Then, the shadow of the sword roared like a dragon and rushed towards Luo Qi. Boom! Luo Qi's eyes narrowed, but he did not panic. Instead, his body jerked as numerous black symbols surged out from his body and formed a black flame armor around him. Bang! In the next moment, the sword shadows fell and bombarded the black flame armor. However, it suddenly paused and then collapsed. At the same time, the black flame armor on Luo Qi's body also disappeared. It was obvious that he did not want others to see his black flame armor. However, it was a pity that many people below had seen the black flame armor. QL11 Nie Tian and Luo Qi's figures retreated at the same time and then stabilized themselves at the same time. After a while, the violent waves in the void dispersed, and the two figures appeared in front of the crowd. That black flame armor is Luo Qi's true strength, isn't it? Nie Tian looked at Luo Qi with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. He was very curious as to why Luo Qi possessed such strength. Although the black flame armor had only appeared for a moment, the evil aura was so strong that even Nie Tian could not help but be afraid. If Luo Qi had used the black flame armor's strength just now, the result of the collision would have been different. Fat Cat had noticed Luo Qi's strangeness, which was why she had asked Nie Tian to use his full strength to force Luo Qi to use his true strength. Luo Qi did not use the black flame armor's strength because he did not want others to see it. However, if he had not used the black flame armor to defend himself, he would have been seriously injured even if he did not die. At that moment, Luo Qi stared coldly at Nie Tian. His eyes were cold and murderous, as if he wanted to swallow Nie Tian alive. Although he was not injured, he had been forced to use his true strength. He had underestimated Nie Tian. If he had known that Nie Tian's strength was so terrifying, he would have used his full strength to kill Nie Tian directly, even if it meant exposing his true strength. However, it was too late now, because the collision between him and Nie Tian had ended. You are indeed strong. Nie Tian looked at Luo Qi and smiled, his eyes filled with provocation. Nie Tian, I have underestimated you. Luo Qi's face was sinister as he said cold. You won't be so lucky the next time we fight. After saying that, he moved and landed on the ground. Nie Tian smiled faintly and landed on the ground as well. Everyone looked at Nie Tian and Luo Qi in shock, unable to calm down for a long time. Luo Qi, what kind of power did you use just now? At that moment, Bairuaju's face darkened as she looked at Luo Qi cold. Luo Qi was her personal disciple, but she had never known that the black flame armor in his body had such power. Even though she was separated from Luo Qi by tens of thousands of meters, she could feel the evil aura contained in the black flame armor. Could it be that she had never understood this disciple of hers, or that Luo Qi had been pretending in front of her? Teacher, this is my business. You don't have to worry too much about it, Luo Qi said coldly as he looked at Bairuaju. After saying that, he took a step back and walked into the crowd, not saying anything else. Bairuaju's pretty face froze and became extremely ugly. At that moment, she felt that Luo Qi was so unfamiliar. Was this still that humble and respectful disciple? Teacher Bai, Luo Qi only concealed his strength. You don't have to blame him. After all, every martial artist has their own secrets, Yulian said with a laugh as he took a step forward. Bairuoju only reacted after a long time. If Luo Qi really concealed his strength, then he hid it too deeply. Bairuoju could not accept this statement. She felt that Luo Qi's body was definitely hiding a huge secret. Let's go. Yu Yin smiled faintly, turned around, and started to walk out of the Arctic snow mountain. A small storm ended just like that. But in Yetian's heart, there was a huge question. Yetian, I'm afraid this Luo Qi is no longer Luo Qi. At this time, without waiting for him to ask, Fat Cat's voice already sounded. What do you mean? Yetian's brows furrowed. He did not understand Fat Cat's strange words. Chapter 2973. Soul Possession. Nietian's expression sank after hearing the Fat Cat's words. Soul possession was a very sinister method. To put it simply, it was to use a powerful soul to forcibly occupy another cultivator's body. In the past, Nietian's soul was almost possessed by Di Shi Tian and the Ghost Emperor. Now that the Fat Cat said that Luo Qi's soul was possessed, how could Nietian not be shocked? Fat, are you sure? After a while, Nietian became cold and asked with a frown. Very sure. The Fat Cat replied in a deep voice. The moment you forced Luo Qi to use his true strength, I could tell that Luo Qi is a member of the Soul Eater tribe. Soul Eater tribe. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he heard this name again. Is this tribe very powerful? Yes. The Fat Cat nodded and said, the Soul Eater tribe is one of the 4 great tribes in the ancient times. Rumor has it that this tribe has been extinct for a long time. I didn't expect there to be someone still alive. The 4 great tribes in the ancient times. Nietian frowned slightly. This was not the first time he had heard this name. Moreover, he should have come into contact with the 4 great tribes in the ancient times. The Holy Soul Valley, the Cloud Buddha Shur clan, the 7 Knights Way clan, and the Soul Eater tribe were the 4 great tribes in the ancient times. The Soul Eater tribe was on par with the Holy Soul Valley and the Cloud Buddha Shur clan. It was enough to prove that this tribe was very powerful. Nietian, do you know what the bloodline power of the Soul Eater tribe is? The Fat Cat's expression changed and suddenly asked. Nietian shook his head. This was the first time he had heard of the Soul Eater tribe. How could he know the bloodline power of this tribe? The bloodline power of the Soul Eater tribe is called the Soul Eater Curse. It is a kind of power that specializes in soul stealing. The Fat Cat's expression sank slightly as it said in a heavy tone. Soul Eater Curse. Nietian frowned. He did not expect that in this world there was actually a bloodline power that specialized in seizing souls. This kind of bloodline power wasn't all that scary, but it was enough to make one shudder in fear. Imagine, a kind of bloodline power could easily take over a person's soul. This was even crueler than directly killing that person. The power of the soul-devouring ghost curse is extremely terrifying. The Fat Cat continued, soul-devouring is only one of the powers of the soul-devouring ghost curse. With the soul-devouring ghost curse, after the soul-devouring ghost tribe members possess someone else's soul, they can also fuse with the possessed person's bloodline power. With the stimulation of the soul-devouring ghost curse, they will be able to unleash even greater power. When Nietian heard what Fat Cat said, his expression changed and he was shocked. The soul-devouring ghost curse was too terrifying, wasn't it? Not only could it seize the divine soul, but could even fuse with the bloodline power of the seized person. Just imagine, if a member of the soul-devouring ghost tribe possessed a few more times, wouldn't they be able to obtain different kinds of bloodline power? The fusion of several bloodline powers, coupled with the stimulation of the soul-devouring ghost curse, would be able to unleash even greater power? That was too terrifying. Nietian, your attack just now forced Luo Qi to use the soul-devouring ghost curse. That black flame armor is the result of the fusion of the soul-devouring ghost curse and Luo Qi's original bloodline power, said the Fat Cat in a deep voice. Nietian took a deep breath. His heart was filled with astonishment. Nietian, I'm afraid this soul-devouring ghost tribe member is here for you, said the fat cat with a sigh. For me? Nye Tian was startled. His eyes glistened. He recalled the murderous look in Luo Qi's eyes when he came out to challenge him. Only the best assassins would have such a look. When the thought of assassins came to mind, Nye Tian immediately thought of an organization, the Dark Knight. An assassin like Luo Qi could only be nurtured by the Dark Knight. Nye Tian was already on the Dark Knight heavenly kill list. Thus, the Dark Knight must have figured out his background. With that in mind, it was not surprising that Luo Qi would appear here. The original Luo Qi must have suffered an undeserved calamity and was possessed by the current Luo Qi. The Dark Knight assassin possessed Luo Qi with only one goal, to get close to Nye Tian and kill him. However, he did not expect Nye Tian's strength to greatly surpass his expectations. Nye Tian, be careful. This soul-devouring ghost tribe member is not easy to deal with, said the fat cat in a deep voice to warn Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded. Then, he thought of something and asked, if I kill the current Luo Qi, does that mean this soul-devouring ghost tribe member will die too? Not necessarily. The fat cat shook his head and said, the soul-devouring ghost tribe is an extremely mysterious force. Due to the existence of the soul-devouring ghost curse, the soul-devouring ghost tribe members have abnormally strong souls. Even if their bodies are gone, their souls can still exist for a long time. Upon hearing little fat cat's words, Nye Tian's face couldn't help but turn ugly. He did not expect the soul-devouring ghost tribe to be so strange. Nye Tian, you do not need to worry too much. This soul-devouring ghost tribe member has already attacked once. He should not be attacking again in the near future. The fat cat nodded slightly and said, moreover, your soul is not weak. This guy cannot possess you. As long as you are strong enough, you do not need to be afraid of him. Nye Tian nodded and couldn't help but take a look at Luo Qi. He did not plan on revealing Luo Qi's identity. Even if he did, the others would not believe him. He was the son of the greatest traitor of Holy Soul Academy. Most people in the academy were not friendly toward him. A moment later, Nye Tian and the others walked out of the Arctic Snow Mountain and quickly returned to the temporary city. After bidding farewell to Bai Ruozhu, Nye Tian left to find Hua Ru. Soon, he arrived at Hua Iru's place. Nye Tian. Hua Iru was pleasantly surprised to see Nye Tian. He had been very worried about Nye Tian after he entered the Arctic Snow Mountain for so long. Now that Nye Tian had returned, he was naturally happy. But in the next moment, when he sensed Nye Tian's strength, his old face instantly froze, and he could not speak for a long time. He could not believe his eyes. Nye Tian was already a rank 1 demi-saint. After all, it had only been 10 days since Nye Tian had ascended to the first step of the demi-saint realm from the third step of the half-saint realm. That was almost a major advancement in his cultivation base. How did Nye Tian do it? Elder Hua, I didn't let you down, did I? Nye Tian said with a faint smile, having already expected such a reaction from Hua Gong. No. Hua Iru only reacted after a dozen seconds. He shook his head repeatedly, his old face wrinkled like a blooming flower. Not only did Nye Tian not let him down, but he had also given him a pleasant surprise. A huge surprise. Let's go, Nye Tian. Prepare to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain. After a moment, Hua Iru calmed down and said to Nye Tian. Then, the two came to a square in the temporary city and met up with the others from Holy Soul Academy. There were hundreds of people standing in the square, all of whom were going to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain. Apart from some teachers, these hundreds of people were all genius martial artists of Holy Soul Academy. There were people from the outer court, the inner court, the core court, and even those on the Hidden Dragon list. No one knew what was inside the Arctic Snow Mountain, so it was necessary to bring along genius martial artists of all ages and levels. And on the high platform in the center of the square, a black-robed figure stood, his eyes cold and disdainful as he looked around. Chapter 2974. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw Kuyo Onaguchi, and the blood in his body almost boiled as he became restless. Kuyo Onaguchi had almost killed Nye Fenghua, and Nye Tian was naturally very excited to see him. Calm down, Nye Tian. Hua Iru, sensing Nye Tian's irritation, secretly transmitted his voice to him. Nye Tian's eyes focused for a moment, and he became much calmer. Of course, he knew that now was not the time to fall out with Kuyo Onaguchi. At the same time, on the high platform, Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes glazed over when he noticed Nye Tian. It was clear that he had sensed Nye Tian's strength and was deeply shocked. He had never imagined that Nye Tian's strength would reach level 1 demi-saint in such a short time. He clearly remembered that Nye Tian had only been in the sacred spirit domain for a few months, and that Nye Tian was only at the pinnacle of divinity state at that time. Nye Tian's strength had risen to level 1 demi-saint in just a few months. That was too terrifying. Master, how could this kid's strength be? Beside Kuyo Onaguchi, Bien Hongnong, the lord of the Starry Sky Pavilion, was so shocked that he could not speak. His impression in Nye Tian was, of course, deep. It was Nye Tian who triggered the sacred spirit steel, and even the martial fate matrix of the Starry Sky Pavilion was destroyed by Nye Tian. Bien Hongnong personally believed that Nye Tian had the legendary fate of gods and demons. Of course, he was aware of the power of the fate of gods and demons, but he had never imagined that Nye Tian's strength would improve at such a terrifying speed. The fate of gods and demons. Could he really be an existence that transcends the realm of gods and demons? Bien Hongnong's face was full of shock as he thought to himself. Kuyo Onaguchi's expression softened, but the corners of his mouth revealed an unconcealable smile. He said in his heart, Nye Tian, the speed of your growth has exceeded my expectations. It seems like you're indeed much stronger than Ye Fenghua. From the looks of it, it won't be long before you'll be able to help me accomplish what your father couldn't. Thinking of this, Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes surged with a strange light. That was his life's goal. He believed that Nye Tian could do it. Next, Kuyo Onaguchi said a few things, and then the people of Saint Soul Academy began to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain. After everyone entered the Arctic Snow Mountain, they headed straight into the depths of the mountain. The various forces had agreed to meet in an ice valley in the hinterland of the snowy mountains. Nye Tian estimated that since the Holy World Seed was such a big event, all the peak experts of the Holy Soul Realm would be present. At that time, it would definitely be a fierce battle. After a few hours, everyone arrived outside a huge ice valley. And at this time, there was a hubbub in the ice valley. The warriors of the other forces had already gathered in the ice valley. The people of Saint Soul Academy, led by Kuyo Onaguchi, entered the ice valley. This ice valley was very vast, and the wind and snow inside were also a little lighter. And in the center of the ice valley, there was a large pavilion. Dozens of warriors sat in the pavilion, each with a powerful and terrifying aura. Kuyo Onaguchi, Tianyu, Hua Iru, and several other high-level figures of Saint Soul Academy walked directly towards the pavilion. Nye Tian couldn't help but look at the large pavilion, feeling the aura of the people in the pavilion. He was shocked. These people were the peak experts of the various forces of the Holy Soul Realm, and also the peak figures of the entire Holy Soul Realm. But Nye Tian saw that these people's seats had a clear hierarchy, and sitting on the main seat was a middle-aged warrior. His features were delicate and handsome, and his heroic spirit was imposing. His aura was restrained, and there was a smile on his face. TQR1, this middle-aged warrior's strength was not strong. He was only a 7th-order pseudo-martial sage, but the others were surrounding him. Obviously, his status was very high. Nye Tian was very curious who this middle-aged warrior was. Nye Tian. And at this time, a familiar voice suddenly sounded behind Nye Tian. He turned around and saw that it was Feng Qi. Behind Feng Qi stood Si Xiaoye. Nye Tian, I knew you would come. Feng Qi was very happy to see Nye Tian, and he smiled happily. But Si Xiaoye's gaze on Nye Tian froze, and then her face froze. Nye Tian looked at Si Xiaoye and Feng Qi, and his face also froze in shock. He suddenly realized that Si Xiaoye and Feng Qi's strength had actually reached the 9th order half-martial sage. And not long ago, Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya were low-level half-martial sages. Holy shit. Meanwhile, Feng Qi realized Nie Tian's strength and exclaimed, "Are you a monster?" Nie Tian collected his thoughts and said with a smile, "The improvement of your strength is quite shocking." It seemed like Nie Tian was not the only one whose strength had skyrocketed during this period of time. I made a trip back to my clan a while ago, and under the arrangement of my clan, I had some fortuitous encounters. Feng Qi took a long time to calm down. He explained and said with a dejected face, "I thought that my strength would be much higher than yours. I didn't expect you to be stronger than me." It turned out that his strength had improved due to the support of his clan. He thought his strength would surpass Nie Tian's by a lot, but when he saw Nie Tian again, he was completely dumbfounded. The same went for Si Xiaoya, who had returned with Feng Qi, which was why her strength had skyrocketed. Nie Tian nodded slightly with a faint smile. However, he was still shocked that the Feng clan was able to help Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya improve so quickly. It was obvious how powerful this clan was. With a faint smile, Nie Tian calmed down and asked, "Feng Qi, those people in that pavilion are all important figures from the Saint Soul realm, right?" "Of course." Feng Qi nodded with a smile. "Apart from the 9 mystical sect, Wuji dynasty, and Shenluo dynasty, the rest of the top 10 factions of the Sacred Soul region are here." Nie Tian nodded slightly. He already knew the top 10 factions of the Sacred Soul region. He also knew some of the people in the pavilion. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked, "Who's that man sitting in the seat of honor?" "Well," Feng Qi looked at the middle-aged cultivator and hesitated before saying, "He's my 9th uncle, Qin Zhengyue." Nie Tian's expression flickered with astonishment. He never would have thought that the middle-aged cultivator sitting in the main seat was Feng Qi's 9th uncle. This meant that the Myriad Domains Guild was also involved. Nie Tian had heard from Shi Chan that the first sacred world seed of the Sacred Soul region was in the hands of the Myriad Domains Guild. Could it be that the Myriad Domains Guild wanted to control a second sacred world seed? He was a little curious as to why Feng Qi's 9th uncle was called Qin Zhengyue. His surname wasn't Feng, but Qin. However, he didn't ask too much. After all, this was the Feng clan's matter. Feng Qi looked at Nie Tian and said with a faint smile, "Nie Tian, don't worry. Our Myriad Domains Guild won't get our hands on the Sacred World Seed this time. We're just here to give the other factions of the Sacred Soul region a fair ruling, lest they start a war." "Oh." Nie Tian nodded and felt a little more at ease. It was best if the Myriad Domains Guild didn't interfere. If they did, Nie Tian had to obtain the Sacred World Seed. The Sacred World Seed was too important to him. He had to get it. "Kid, you're here." At this time, a low growl suddenly sounded. Chapter 2975. When Nie Tian saw the scarred martial artist in front of him, his face darkened. It was obvious that this scarred martial artist had been looking for him, and he finally found him. "Stinking brat, you killed our Rong clan's 7th young master, and you still dare to show yourself? You really have guts." The scarred man stared at Nie Tian with a murderous look. The crowd was attracted by his voice. They all looked over and started discussing. Who is this brat? He actually dared to kill someone from the Rong clan. It looks like he didn't kill an ordinary person. It seems to be the Rong clan's direct descendant. This is troublesome. The Rong clan is so powerful. This brat will definitely pay with his life for the Rong clan's young master. This little silver hair is really arrogant. He killed the Rong clan's young master, and he still dares to show up. Isn't he looking for death? The crowd talked one after another, and their eyes all locked onto Nie Tian. "Brat, it's you." At this time, another voice sounded. Then a martial artist appeared, pointed at Nie Tian, and shouted, "It's him. He killed our Mu clan's 19th young master and Lord Mu Hongshan." Nie Tian frowned. Looking at the person in front of him, he immediately recognized him. This person was the Mu clan martial artist who escaped from his hands. The sudden scene made everyone's eyes tremble. They were surprised and shocked. Who would have thought that not only did Nie Tian kill the Rong clan's young master, he also killed the Mu clan's young master? This brat is too fierce. He actually killed people from 2 great clans. This guy looks sloppy and ordinary, but he actually killed people from the Rong clan and Mu clan. He's really fierce. This guy's an idiot. He killed the young masters of 2 great clans, and he still dares to appear. He's pretending that nothing happened. The crowd looked at Nie Tian, and their eyes became crooked. TQR1 Nie Tian looked at the crowd. His face did not change much, and he was very calm. However, Feng Qi and Si Xiaoye, who were beside him, could not remain calm. Their faces froze. Nie Tian, did you really kill the people of the Rong family and the Mu family? Feng Qi asked in surprise after a long while. Nie Tian nodded. There wasn't even a hint of nervousness on his face. How dare you? How can you be so calm after killing a member of our Rong family? Do you think our Rong family is easy to bully? At this time, even more Rong clan cultivators arrived. Each and every one of them was overbearing, as if they wanted to skin Nie Tian alive. Killing a member of the Mu clan is the same as slapping the Mu clan in the face. Do you think there's no one in the Mu clan? Immediately, the warriors of the Mu clan surrounded Nie Tian. And Nie Tian's side were people from Saint Spirit Academy, and right now, they were unexpectedly, deliberately pulling away from him. The people of Saint Spirit Academy wanted to draw a clear line between themselves and him. They didn't want to be implicated by him. Nie Tian, what's going on? Only Bai Ruaju walked over at this time. She looked at Nie Tian and asked with an ugly expression. There were many pseudo-saint experts among the warriors of the Rong and Mu clans. If they suddenly attacked, Nie Tian would be in danger. Teacher Bai, I did kill the people of the Rong and Mu clans. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said, but I killed them for a reason. Nonsense. What reason do you have to kill the people of the Rong clan? The warriors of the Rong clan roared and were about to attack. Brat, you wanted to steal the sacred Qi whirlpool, so you killed Lord Mu Hongshan. Don't quibble. The warriors of the Mu clan shouted even louder. In an instant, the scene became very intense, as if it was about to get out of control. Enough. Right at this moment, a low roar resounded from within the pavilion. Everyone was surprised. When they turned around and saw the person who spoke, they immediately quieted down. Nie Tian frowned and looked over. It was Feng Qi's ninth uncle, Qin Zhengyue, who spoke. Qin Zhengyue was a judge invited by the big forces of the Saint Spirit region. Of course, his words were oppressive. Everyone looked at Qin Zhengyue, waiting for him to speak. At this moment, the other people in the pavilion also looked at Qin Zhengyue. The patriarchs of the Rong and Mu clans didn't speak. They were waiting for Qin Zhengyue to speak. Although the matter in front of them was a small matter, if it wasn't handled well, it would probably lead to a war between all the forces. What's the matter? Come here and talk. Qin Zhengyue's eyes darkened, and he said loudly. Of course, he noticed that Nie Tian and Feng Qi were very close, so he had to be more careful when dealing with the matter in front of him. Nie Tian smiled faintly and walked over. The Rong and Mu clans each sent a representative to a place not far from Nie Tian. Qin Zhengyue looked at Nie Tian and paused for a while. Then he said, I saw it all. You admitted that you killed people from the Rong and Mu clans, right? Yes. Nie Tian nodded calmly. Qin Zhengyue was surprised by Nie Tian's calmness. He didn't expect a young warrior to be so calm in such a situation. Why did you kill them? Qin Zhengyue asked. I killed the 7th young master of the Rong family and other members of the Rong family because I saw Rong Qiwei molesting Yuror of the Yu family. I didn't kill Rong Qiwei right away. Instead, I let him go. However, he came back with a group of people. That's why I teamed up with Yutong Hai of the Yu family to fight against the Rong family, Nie Tian said calmly. Nonsense. Just as he finished speaking, a figure in the pavilion stood up and growled, glaring at him with angry eyes. It was a middle-aged warrior. He was short and fat, but his aura was vigorous. He was a rank 9 pseudo-sage expert. He was the current clan leader of the Rong family, Rong Tong. Rong Chiwei, whom Nie Tian killed, was Rong Tong's son. Clan leader Rong, don't get agitated. Let him finish. Qin Zhengyue turned to look at Rong Tong and gestured for him to sit down. Qi Wei is a pure and kind person. How could he molest the young lady of the Yu family? You're talking nonsense. Rong Tong didn't sit down. Instead, he stared coldly at Nietion and shouted. Nietion frowned but ignored him. He looked at Qin Zhengyue and continued, I killed people from a Mu family because I had some conflict with Morongjio when I first came to the Arctic Snow Mountain. After that, I met Morongjio. He wanted to kill me, and I was forced to fight back. And Morongjio wasn't killed by me. He was killed by Mu Hongshan after he brought me to find the sacred whirlpool. After Mu Hongshan killed Morongjio, he wanted to kill me, and I killed him instead. That's all. I'm done. Nietion finished and looked at Qin Zhengyue calmly. But just as he finished, the people from the Rong and Mu families erupted. He's lying. Our Rong family's 7th young master would never molest the young lady of the Yu family. He's a homicidal maniac. In order to snatch the sacred whirlpool, he killed Lord Mu Hongshan and young master Morongjio. A murderer should not be punished. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. In the end, the scene was filled with shouts of killing. Quiet. Qin Zhengyue frowned and growled. His deep gaze swept across everyone. The scene immediately quieted down. No one dared to speak. Qin Zhengyue frowned and thought. Of course, he knew that killing between martial practitioners was a common thing. Also, Nietion and the others had entered the Arctic Snow Mountain ahead of time. When they met, it was a fight to the death. Regardless of whether Nietion's words were true or false, the fact that he could kill Rong Qiwei and the others was due to his strength. There was no right or wrong. But now that all the factions were watching, it was clear that they wanted Qin Zhengyue to judge whether Nietion was right or wrong. Can anyone prove what you just said? Qin Zhengyue thought for a moment and asked in a low voice. Yu Tonghai and Yu Ruo can prove that I killed Rong Qiwei. Nietion said coolly. Impossible. But before he finished speaking, a figure in the pavilion stood up and looked coldly at Nietion. He said, Yu Ruo never came to the Arctic Snow Mountain. Do not slander young master Rong Qiwei. HM? Nietion frowned and asked that person, Who are you? Chapter 2976. The person in the pavilion stood up slowly and revealed his identity. Nietion's expression flickered as he narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect the person to be Yu Ruo's father, the leader of the Yu clan. What surprised him even more was Yu Qi's words. Although Yu Qi's face was gloomy and angry, Nietion could see that he was hiding his uneasiness. Without a doubt, Yu Qi was lying. Yu Qi must have known that Nietion had saved Yu Ruo, but he didn't defend Nietion. Instead, he slandered Nietion. Nietion had observed that Yu Tonghai and Yu Ruo didn't show up. This must have been arranged by Yu Qi. Nietion couldn't understand why Yu Qi would lie for the Rong clan. Rong Tong, the leader of the Rong clan, smirked and looked at Yu Qi strangely. Although this small movement only lasted for a split second, Nietion saw it with his own eyes. Yu Qi was avoiding Rong Tong, as if he was afraid of something. Looks like there's something fishy going on with the Yu clan. Either he received a bribe from the Rong clan, or the Rong clan has something on him, Nietion thought to himself. However, he was curious. He was just a nobody, while Yu Qi was the leader of the Yu clan. Was there a need for him to slander him? Young man, you heard what leader you said. What else do you have to say? Rong Tong, the leader of the Rong clan, stood up again and stared at Nietion coldly. Even if I have something to say, would you believe me? Nietion smiled. He didn't look nervous at all. Young man, are you going to plead guilty? Rong Tong's face darkened, and he said cold. I'm afraid it's not up to you to decide whether I'll plead guilty or not, Nietion replied coldly. You're about to die, and you still dare to be insolent. How preposterous! Rong Tong growled. His eyes were filled with malice, and he wished he could personally tear Nietion apart. Clan leader Rong. But at this moment, a deep voice sounded, and a figure stood up from the pavilion. It was the dean of the Saint Soul Academy, Kuyo Onaguchi. Dean Gigu, do you have anything to say? Rong Tong was stunned for a moment and looked at Kuyo Onaguchi coldly. Nietion is a student of Saint Spirit Academy. I want to protect him. Kuyo Onaguchi coldly said, his eyes slightly closed, his whole body emitting an insufferably domineering aura. He didn't waste any time and directly said that he wanted to protect Nietian. His attitude was very domineering. TQR 1-inch Kuyo Onaguchi. Aren't your words a little too arrogant? Rongtung's face sank as he shouted in a low voice. Nietian killed the young master of the Rong family because the young master of the Rong family wasn't strong enough. Can you blame anyone else? Kuyo Onaguchi's cold eyes swept across Rongtung and said coldly, if the young master of the Rong family was strong enough, would Nietian still have the chance to stand here? You? Rongtung's eyes trembled, and he suddenly became speechless. Although Kuyo Onaguchi's words were overbearing, they weren't without reason. In a world of martial arts, the strong were always respected. The law of the jungle, where the big fish eats the small fish, was the biggest truth. Regardless of whether Nietian and Rong Chiwei were right or wrong, the one who survived would always be the strong one. Dean Gigu is so domineering. At this moment, another voice was heard. A tall man with a pale face stood up and stared at Kuyo Onaguchi. He said coldly, this kid called Nietian killed the people of my Mu family with his strength and stole the sacred chi whirlpool that was discovered by my Mu family. Dean Gigu, do you want to give my Mu family an explanation? This tall man was none other than the Mu family's patriarch, Mu Xinghe. Kuyo Onaguchi's eyes slightly narrowed, and he couldn't help but glance at Nietian. He didn't expect that Nietian would actually obtain a sacred chi whirlpool. This was a good thing. Patriarch Mu, did you not hear what I said just now? Kuyo Onaguchi smiled faintly and said, in a world of martial arts, the strong are always respected. The sacred chi whirlpool doesn't belong to your Mu family. Can't Nietian fight for it? Kuyo Onaguchi, you are forcibly shielding him. Mu Xinghe's face suddenly darkened, and his face was full of anger. Whatever you say, whoever wants to touch Nietian will have to go through me first. Gue Gigu responded in a domineering and cold manner. When the onlookers saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but flicker, and many people began to discuss in a low voice. Who is this kid called Nietian? Dean Saint Soul is actually willing to directly offend two big families to protect him. This kid's strength is sloppy and ordinary. There is nothing powerful about him. I really don't know how he could kill the people of the Rong family and the Mu family. Could it be that this kid is the young master of a big hidden force, and there's a terrifying expert hiding around him? When the onlookers were discussing, they couldn't help but look at Nietian with fear. It was already strange that Nietian killed the people of the Rong family and the Mu family. Now that Kuyo Onaguchi was protecting him, his identity became even more mysterious. When the people of the Saint Soul Academy saw that Kuyo Onaguchi was protecting Nietian, they of course didn't dare to casually reveal Nietian's identity. These people were even more curious. Why would Kuyo Onaguchi protect the son of a traitor? Kuyo Onaguchi, it seems that I am very important to you. You don't want me to die. Nietian looked at Kuyo Onaguchi, and the corner of his mouth slightly twitched. He already knew that Kuyo Onaguchi would definitely stand out to protect him. However, Kuyo Onaguchi's determination and overbearingness still surprised him. At this moment, he was even more certain that he was very important to Kuyo Onaguchi. Kuyo Onaguchi, you're shielding this person. I can't stand it. At this moment, another person stood up from the pavilion. This person was wearing a black mask, and black runes circled around his body. He looked very strange. This person was the principal of the Netherworld Academy, another academy on the same level as the Saint Soul Academy, Li Jin. The Saint Soul Academy and the Netherworld Academy had always been at odds. It wasn't strange for Li Jin to stand out now. Li Jin, so what if you can't stand it? Kuyo Onaguchi stared at Li Jin cold, not backing down at all. Kuyo Onaguchi, do you really think that you are very strong? So strong that you can fight against the three of us at the same time? Li Jin laughed coldly as his gaze swept across Mu Xinghe and Rongtung. It was obvious that he was colluding with the two great families to threaten Kuyo Onaguchi. Although the 10 great powers of the Holy Soul Domain were considered the same, there were still differences in strength. The one church, 2 academies, 3 families, and 4 dynasties were actually ranked according to their strength. The Saint Sol Academy and the Netherworld Academy were on par. But if the Mu family and the Rong family were included, it would be a completely different story. Li Jin's own strength was no weaker than Kuyo Onaguchi. If he colluded with Mu Xinghe and Rong Tong, Kuyo Onaguchi would not be a match for the 3 of them. As soon as Li Jin's voice fell, the atmosphere instantly became tense. No one would have thought that such a small matter would develop to such an extent. Would the 4 great powers really start a war over a mere Nietian? Humph. So what if it's the 3 of you? I, Kuyo Onaguchi, am not afraid. Kuyo Onaguchi was still as cold as ever. Chapter 2977. Li Jin took a step forward, and his aura directly shattered the pavilion. The atmosphere instantly became extremely tense, and a great battle was about to break out. All the forces had gathered here for the Sacred World Seed, but now, the leaders of the 4 forces were actually going to fight. This was something that no one had expected. Wait! At this moment, 2 voices rang out at almost the same time. It was Qin Zhengyue and Nie Tian. Qin Zhengyue and Nie Tian were stunned at the same time. They looked at each other in surprise. Nie Tian, what else do you have to say? Qin Zhengyue reacted and looked at Nie Tian with fiery eyes. He did not come here for the Sacred World Seed. Instead, he was purely here to be an adjudicator. Of course, he did not become an adjudicator for nothing. He had received rather generous rewards from the various forces. Moreover, after the matter of the Sacred World Seed was settled, he would receive even more generous rewards. Therefore, he did not want the various forces to fight first. Lord Adjudicator, since these people are trying to reason with me, then I'll properly reason with them. Nie Tian looked at Qin Zhengyue and smiled faintly. I still have someone beside me who can prove what I just said. I'll invite him out now. Qin Zhengyue's eyes trembled slightly. He could not help but be curious as to who Nie Tian would invite at this time. In this situation, if Nie Tian invited an unimportant person, even if he could prove what he said, it would not be able to convince the masses. Nie Tian smiled faintly. With a thought, a space-time halo flashed on his body. The next moment, a wretched-looking old man appeared beside him. It was Feng Shetong. Actually, Nie Tian had wanted Feng Shetong to come out earlier, but he wanted to see if Kuyo Onaguchi would stand out. Since Feng Shetong was a member of the Myriad Domains Guild and was also Feng Qi's grandfather, his identity was naturally not simple. No one present could refute what he said. When the crowd saw the wretched-looking old man beside Nie Tian, they were first stunned, then they burst into laughter. Is this kid joking? Where did they find such a wretched old man? Who would believe his words? That little old man is skinny and small like a monkey, and yet he's only a demi-saint at his age. He's definitely a small fry. That lad is really stupid. To think that he would invite an old man like that. He's just making a fool out of himself. Everyone looked at Feng Shetong. They didn't put him in their eyes at all, and they even cursed at him. But when Qin Zhengyue saw Feng Shetong, his face froze. He was so shocked that he froze on the spot. In the distance, Feng Qi was also stunned. His eyes were wide open, and he could not believe the scene in front of him. Elder Feng, there's something I'd like you to prove. Nie Tian didn't care about other people's reactions. He smiled and explained the situation. Take your 1-inch yes. Feng Shu-tong heavily nodded his head and said, Little brat Nie's words are all true. This old man can prove it. After that, he hurriedly said to Nie Tian, Little brat Nie, I've proven it. Let me go back now. I still have things to do. But in the next moment, the crowd burst into laughter. Who does this old thing think he is? That he could just say a few words? He must be an idiot. Does he really think he's some big shot? This old man is obviously on Nie Tian's side. How can we believe his words? It's pure bullsh**t. The crowd was talking loudly, not taking Feng Shudong's proof seriously at all. Elder Feng, it seems that your words are useless. Nie Tian smiled bitterly and shook his head. How dare you? Feng Shetong growled. He then turned around to look at Qin Zhengyue and said loudly, Qin Zhengyue, do you think my word can be trusted? Huh? Everyone's face stiffened when they saw that. They didn't expect Feng Shutong to call Qin Zhengyue by his name. Qin Zhengyue was stunned for a long time. When he heard what the crowd said, his face turned ugly. At this moment, he looked at Feng Shutong, gulped, and said, "Godfather, why are you here?" "Godfather." Hearing how Qin Zhengyue called Feng Shutong, everyone's eyes trembled and they were stunned on the spot. Nie Tian was also stunned. He couldn't react for a long time. How could he have known that Feng Shutong was Qin Jingyue's godfather? No wonder Qin Jingyue was a member of the Feng clan, but didn't have the surname Feng. He was Feng Shutong's godson. "Why can't I be here? Do I have to greet you wherever I go?" Feng Shutong rolled his eyes and said to Nie Tian, "Little brat Nie, I've said what I want to say. Let me go back now." "Okay." Nie Tian smiled faintly and opened 9 extremes to let Feng Shutong go back. Since Uncle Feng had testified and revealed his identity, then everything was enough. Feng Shutong's figure disappeared. The scene was dead silent. One could hear a pin drop. At this time, Kuyo Anaguchi was the first to speak. He asked with a faint smile, "Lord Adjudicator, may I ask if that old man was the tri-absolute ghost genius, Master Feng Shutong?" "Yes." Qin Jingyue nodded. His face was much calmer. He knew that his godfather had a strange temper, but the scene just now still surprised him. Tri-absolute ghost genius, Feng Shutong. When the people around Kuyo Anaguchi heard this name, their faces stiffened. They couldn't say anything for a long time. The name Tri-absolute ghost genius was very famous in the entire Myriad domain. It was Feng Shutong's name. The reason why Feng Shutong had this name was because his attainments in alchemy, sealing, and enchantment had reached the pinnacle of the Myriad domain. Alchemy, sealing, and enchantment. It was not easy to specialize in one, not to mention mastering all 3. Hence, Feng Shutong was known as the tri-absolute ghost genius. He was a unique existence in the entire Myriad domain. Although Feng Shutong was famous, his temper was eccentric and his whereabouts were erratic. Hence, there were very few people who had actually seen him. Furthermore, Feng Shutong had another identity. He was an Empyrean Elder of the Myriad Domain Association. An Empyrean Elder was the most respected existence in the Myriad Domain Association apart from the president. One could imagine how high his status was. After thoroughly understanding Feng Shutong's identity, Li Jin and the others had ugly expressions. As for the surrounding crowd, most of them were still a loss. Feng Shutong was famous among the big shots. Normal people would not understand what the tri-absolute ghost genius meant. "So this old thing's status is so high," Nie Tian said in his heart when he saw Li Jin and the others' expressions. He knew that Feng Shutong's status was very high, but he absolutely did not expect it to be this high. "Dean Li, Clan Chief Mu, Clan Chief Rong, you all heard my godfather's words, right?" At this time, Qin Jingyue calmed down. His gaze swept across Li Jin and the others. With a cold gaze, he said, "Nie Tian's matter ends here." Li Jin and the others' expressions were ugly to the extreme. Although they were unwilling, they still nodded. Qin Jingyue wanted the matter to end here because he did not want to make things too ugly for everyone. He wanted to leave some leeway for both sides. Chapter 2978. And so, the storm came to an end. Qin Jingyue looked at Nie Tian for a long time, wondering why the latter would be involved with Feng Shutong. It took a long time for the scene to calm down. Many were looking at Nie Tian with different gazes. Fear, doubt, shock, and all sorts of other emotions were mixed together, their expressions extremely complex. Then, everyone waited quietly. To successfully break the holy barrier of the Holy Realm Seed, various factions had invited some formation masters. Some of the formation masters had yet to arrive. About half an hour later, there was a commotion outside the valley, and a green-robed elder entered the valley, escorted by the crowd. The people in the valley automatically parted, forming 2 sides. The green-robed elder smiled and walked over quickly. Grandmaster Su, Dean Li Jin of the Abyss Academy, was very enthusiastic when he saw the green-robed elder hurrying up to greet him. The green-robed old man in front of him was called Su Chun. He was ranked in the top 3 of the 10,000 domain formation grandmasters ranking. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Su Chen. Su Chen's spiritual energy was very powerful, as vast and boundless as an ocean. Yeah, that old man is a demi-saint tier 8 divine formation master. Having such a level of formation cultivation in the realms is already not bad. That was when the fat cat's voice echoed and spoke flatly. Beyond level 9, the divine alchemists and formation masters of the realms were also divided into demi-saints, demi-saint, and pseudo-saints, as well as levels 1 to 9. Still, there was not much difference between a demi-saint level 1 and a demi-saint level 8, and the only difference was the amount of spiritual energy. The further one progressed in the art of formations, the more difficult it became. Moreover, there were too many things that could be integrated into a formation, such as seals, barriers, and so on. That was why it was even more difficult to improve in the art of formations. In the 10,000 domains, the best divine alchemists could reach the pseudo-saint level 9, while the best divine formation masters were only demi-saint level 9. There was not a single pseudo-saint divine formation master in the 10,000 domains. Mu Shuizhang, whom Ye Tian had met in the frozen ruins, was merely a demi-saint divine formation master, but was already known as the number 1 divine formation master there. That was why Su Chen, a demi-saint tier 8 divine array master, could become one of the top 3 array masters in the myriad domains. Everyone, sorry to have kept you waiting. Su Chen walked forward and smiled faintly as his gaze swept across everyone. You're too kind, Master Su. Qin Jingwei walked over and bowed slightly to show his respect. Even if he was a member of the Myriad Domain Guild, when he saw an array master like Su Chen, he also had to be respectful. The others stepped forward and exchanged pleasantries. Even an overbearing person like Kuyo Onaguchi had to bow his head in front of Su Chen. Su Chen was a formation grandmaster invited by the 7 major forces. Whether or not they could break the Saint Energy Restriction formation of the Sacred World Seed depended on Su Chen. So how could they not be courteous to him? Everyone, you guys are way too courteous. How can I, Su, accept this? Su Chen smiled faintly. Then he glanced at the crowd and suddenly said, These people must be the elites of the Saint Soul region. Why didn't they greet me when they saw me? Qin Jingyue was taken aback for a moment. Then he said loudly, Let me introduce everyone. This is Master Su Chen, one of the top 3 array masters in the Myriad Domain. You guys are really lucky to be able to meet Master Su Chen. Everyone's eyes trembled slightly. Then, they immediately understood and bowed in unison. Greetings, Master Su. Tens of thousands of people shouted in unison. Their voices were thunderous and extremely imposing. When Ye Tian saw this, the corners of his mouth curled up into a slight smile. He thought to himself, This formation master is really interesting. He says he's sorry, but then he comes up with this. He really likes to show off. Su Chen had a high attainment in array formations, but he was arrogant and loved to be in the limelight. It was as if he was afraid that others did not know that he was an array master. Su Chen nodded slightly. His face was full of smiles. Then he said, Since I'm here, let's get started. This guy did not waste any time. As soon as he arrived, he was ready to enter the Saint Energy Restriction formation of the Sacred World Seed. Master Su, please wait a moment. There are still 2 array masters who have not arrived. Qin Jingwei stepped forward and said with a faint smile. Su Chen's face darkened at Qin Jingyue's words. You guys even invited other divine array masters? Are you doubting my ability in array formations? Well, Qin Jingyue looked embarrassed and quickly said, Of course not. We were just afraid that Master Su would be overworked. That's why we invited 2 array masters to assist you from the side. That's more like it. Su Chen's expression improved a little. Aside from those 2 old monsters who are about to die, no one would dare to call themselves master before me. That's true. Qin Jingyue nodded and could only go along with Su Chen. Nye Tian could not help but shake his head and smile at the sight. This array master really has no bounds to his arrogance. Idiot! It was then that the Ghost Emperor's voice rang. A mere demi-saint divine array master is nothing more than trash. He's not even fit to carry my shoes. Haha, that fellow is good enough to carry my shoes. The fat cat's voice rang as well. After that, the crowd did not have to wait for long before another commotion occurred outside the valley. Soon, two old men appeared, walking side by side with a group of people following behind them. Master Mu, Master Ku. Qin Jingyue quickly took a step forward and greeted the two old men respectfully. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw one of the two old men. The corner of his mouth twitched as he laughed. Mu Shuijing is here as well. It turned out that one of the old men was very familiar to Nie Tian. It was Mu Shuijing, the disciple he had taken in back in the frozen ruins. TQR1 Nie Tian never imagined that Mu Shuijing would be here as well. Mu Shuijing and the other old man quickly stepped forward. Both of them saw Su Chun and walked towards him. You must be Master Su Chun, ranked third on the list of array masters. It's an honor to meet you. Mu Shuijing smiled brightly and took a step forward, bowing slightly. Master Su, I apologize for my lack of manners. The other old man bowed as well, showing respect to Su Chun. Su Chun, however, held his head high, his nostrils flipping up to the sky as he responded very calmly. Mu Shuijing and the other old man's faces stiffened and instantly turned ugly. They had long heard that Su Chun was arrogant, but they did not expect him to be that arrogant. Master Su, allow me to introduce you. This is Master Mu Shuijing, and this is Master Ku Wu. Qin Jingyue looked awkward at the sight and quickly took a step forward. Chapter 2979. Su Chen's voice was not loud, but to Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu, it sounded like thunder. After saying that, Su Chen turned around and walked away. Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu's faces were as ugly as bitter gourds. Master Mu, Master Ku, I'm really sorry. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Seeing the situation, Qin Jingyue hurriedly spoke up. He could only take the blame. Forget it. Since they look down on us, why should we stay? Brother Ku, let's leave. Mu Shuijing frowned and said coldly after a pause. He was also a very arrogant person. How could he tolerate such cowardice? It's better if we leave. We don't want to embarrass ourselves. Su Chen paused. He did not even turn around and said loudly. He was so arrogant that he was born in his mother's womb. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere became dead silent and oppressive. Who would have thought that the three array masters would fight among themselves before they even worked together? Let's go. Mu Shuijing's face was so dark that it looked like blood was dripping from it. With a low growl, he turned around and left. Master Ku Wu, who did not speak much, also waved his sleeves angrily and left. TQR1, after all, they were respected array masters. Yet, they were looked down upon by Su Chun. What was the point of staying here? Master Mu, Master Ku, don't leave. Qin Jingyue hurriedly followed, trying to pull Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu back. Let them go. With two less burdens, I can break the array faster. Isn't that better? Just then, Su Chen's voice was heard again. He laughed wildly. Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu were so angry that they almost bled. They immediately quickened their pace. This! Qin Jingyue's face froze. He knew that there was no turning back and was momentarily speechless. If he knew this would happen, he would not have invited Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu. Behind Qin Jingyue, Kuyo Onaguchi and the rest also looked embarrassed. However, they did not try to stop Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu. If Su Chun could not coexist with Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu, they could only choose to keep Su Chun. Mu Shuijing, since you are here, why are you in such a hurry to leave? It's not bad to stay and watch the show. At this moment, a calm voice suddenly rang out. Then, a figure walked out from the crowd. Huh? The crowd was stunned at first, but when they saw the face of the figure, their expressions stiffened. The person who stood out at this time was actually Nie Tian. Nie Tian had just almost caused a war between the four major forces. He had already stolen the limelight. What did he want to do now? Moreover, he had even called Mu Shuijing by his name. Wasn't this courting death? Calling him by his name was a great disrespect to an array master. Even Qin Jingyue had to address Master Mu respectfully, let alone him. When Mu Shuijing heard Nie Tian's voice his tensed old face suddenly darkened, following which a look of pleasant surprise surged in his eyes. His body froze, and he abruptly turned around, exclaiming, "Teacher!" He had never imagined that he would actually see Nietian here. Just now, he was so angry with Su-chan that he didn't observe the people around him at all. He was overjoyed to see Nietian. "Teacher!" At his voice, everyone's eyes shuddered violently. Their faces were instantly petrified as they were left dumbfounded on the spot. They had heard it clearly. Mu Shuijing had actually called Nietian teacher. How could that be? A great array master was actually Nietian's disciple? What kind of joke was that? One after another, stunned gazes were directed at Nietian, with what the F asterisks written all over their faces. "Mu Shuijing, you're not bad. You're already a demi-sane array master." Nietian looked at Mu Shuijing calmly and said with a smile. The last time they met, Mu Shuijing was still a demi-sane array master. Now he was a demi-sane array master, a huge improvement. This disciple's improvement is all thanks to teacher's guidance. Mu Shuijing reacted and quickly walked to Nietian's side. His demeanor was so respectful that he did not look like an array master at all, and was completely an obedient disciple. His rapid improvement in array mastery was all thanks to the array blueprints of the Ghost Emperor's tomb that Nietian had given him back then. Every day, he would study the array blueprints painstakingly, which was why he could improve so rapidly today. The crowd's eyes were completely dumbfounded at the sight. "Brother Ku, come quickly. Let me introduce you. This is my teacher." Mu Shuijing then pulled the stiff kunai to him and said excitedly, Brother Mu, your formation blueprint. It was this Grandmaster who gave it to you?" Ku Wu finally reacted. His tongue spun around in his mouth, and he finally managed to complete his sentence. "Yes." Mu Shuijing nodded solemnly. "Brother Ku, I've told you before that my teacher is an unparalleled array master. That array blueprints was something that teacher had deconstructed in a very short time. So that's really the case." Kanai's eyes were trembling violently. His gaze towards Nietian was immeasurably worshipful, his expression as if he was on a pilgrimage, and he was just short of prostrating before Nietian. "Shuijing, this is your friend, right? Not bad. He's already a rank 9 half-sage divine array master." Nietian looked at Kanai without any expression on his face as he said with a faint smile. When Kanai heard Nietian's words, he was stunned. His eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. When a divine array master reached the later stages, it was very difficult to perceive their strength. Nietian only took a glance at him and was able to say that his attainments in array blueprints were truly terrifying. At this moment, in Kanai's heart, Nietian was simply an existence akin to a god. "Teacher, Brother Ku has always wanted to study that array blueprints with me. If we are together, we can communicate more and help each other. It's just that without teacher's permission, disciple doesn't dare to make a decision. I wonder if teacher..." At this time, Mu Shuijing remembered something important and hurriedly asked Nietian for instructions. "The array blueprints are yours. You could do whatever you want with them." Before Mu Shuijing could finish speaking, Nietian said with a faint smile, "Thank you, teacher." Mu Shuijing's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly bowed to express his gratitude. "Thank you, master." Kanai was even more excited. He nodded repeatedly and was so excited that he was about to jump up. When the crowd saw the scene in front of them, their faces were stiff and numb. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. After a long time, the crowd's expressions finally eased up a little. Regardless of whether they accepted it or not, they had to admit that Nietian was indeed Mu Shuijing's teacher. Mu Shuijing, a dignified array master, couldn't possibly put on an act here for fun. On the other side, Kuyo Onaguchi and Hua Iru had the most complicated expressions. The difference was that Kuyo Onaguchi had an incomparably shocked and complicated expression, while Hua Iru had an incomparably joyful and complicated expression. "Mu Shuijing, Kanai, you two fools. You've really thrown away the face of divine array masters." At this time, a maniacal laughter rang out. It was Su-chan. He said loudly, You've actually acknowledged a child who's still wet behind the ears as your teacher. You even said that he's some unparalleled array master. Do you think everyone is a 3-year-old child? Su-chun, you can look down on me, Mu Shui-jing. But if you dare to look down on teacher, I'll fight you to the death. Before Nye Tian could speak, Mu Shui-jing let out a strange cry and actually wanted to charge forward. However, Nye Tian stretched out his hand to block Mu Shui-jing. He smiled faintly and said, Shui-jing, we don't have to lower ourselves to the level of an idiot. His voice was very calm, but it was like a clap of thunder that resounded in everyone's ears. Chapter 2980. As soon as Nye Tian's voice fell, the entire place was dead silent. All eyes were focused on him, as if suspecting that their ears were playing tricks on them. Nye Tian actually called Su-chun an idiot in front of so many people. Who was Su-chun? He was the third-ranked array master in the Myriad Territories. Even the Myriad Territories Guild's guild leader had to address him as a master. But now he was actually called an idiot by someone he couldn't even be bothered to look at. How would he accept this? What did you say, you stinking brat? The moment of dead silence was broken by Su-chen's roar. His eyes were trembling, the muscles on his face were trembling, and his entire body was trembling. Even the blood in his body was trembling. Without a doubt, this was the trembling of rage. Su-chun had lived for so long, and no one had ever dared to call him an idiot. If he didn't vent this anger, he would definitely suffocate to death. I said that you are an idiot. Nye Tian looked at Su-chun, smiled faintly, and said, Your attainments in array formations aren't even worthy of carrying my shoes. You. Su-chen's pupils suddenly constricted. He pointed at Nye Tian and was about to speak, but his chest felt stuffy. His body swayed, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. He was angered by Nye Tian to the point of vomiting blood. He was an arrogant person, but now he felt that his arrogance was being trampled on. It was as if Nye Tian was wantonly stepping on his face in front of everyone. Vomiting blood, just like that? Nye Tian laughed and said loudly, Looks like not only are you an idiot, but you're also a narrow-minded idiot. Uft, uft, uft. Su-chen's eyes trembled violently, and he actually spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood in succession. His old face turned deathly pale. If Nye Tian said a few more words, he would probably vomit blood to death. Stinking brat, you're courting death. At this moment, a deep and powerful roar sounded from behind Su-chun. Then, a terrifying aura soared into the sky, instantly turning into an overwhelming pressure that enveloped Nye Tian. Impudent. At the same time, another voice rang out. A terrifying aura erupted and pressed down on the space. Bang! In the next moment, the two forces collided, and a terrifying muffled sound erupted in the void. A violent wave of air surged in all directions. At this moment, the figure behind Su-chun was knocked back repeatedly. After stabilizing his body, he vomited a mouthful of blood. This cultivator was Su-chen's bodyguard. When he saw Su-chun vomiting blood repeatedly, he couldn't help but make a move. However, he didn't expect that someone had been guarding against him. Thank you, Lord Adjudicator. Nye Tian smiled and thanked Qin Jingyue. The person who attacked just now was Qin Jingyue. Qin Jingyue only had the strength of a 7th-order pseudo-holiness, but he relied on his aura to injure Su-chen's 8th-order pseudo-holiness guard. Mr. Nye Tian, it's good that you're fine. Qin Jingyue smiled faintly. Even the way he addressed Nye Tian had changed. He vaguely felt that Nye Tian was hiding a shocking secret. Mu Shuijing turned out to be Nye Tian's disciple, and Nye Tian had a close relationship with Feng Shetong. When these things were connected, Qin Jingyue couldn't help but treat Nye Tian differently. Qin Jingyue, what do you mean by this? At this moment, Su-chun was completely enraged and growled like a wild beast. Master Su, Mr. Nye Tian only had a small argument with you. You don't have to kill him. Qin Jingyue frowned and said coldly. To be honest, he couldn't stand Su-chen's arrogance. Qin Jingyue, didn't you hear that this kid insulted me? Su-chen almost went crazy. He shouted, I order you to kill him. Qin Zhengyue frowned and decided not to hold it in anymore. He said directly, Master Su, you have no right to order me. You're the array master we invited to help us break the array. If you don't want to break the array, you can leave. You. Su Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. The stuffiness in his chest almost made him explode. Master Su, let's go. The guard took a step forward and said in a deep voice. Pointing in Yetian, Su Chun bellowed, I'm not leaving. I'm going to kill him. Like a shrew, he shouted, I'm not leaving. The crowd was completely stunned. How could they have expected things to turn out this way? Master Su, since you want me dead, I'll give you a chance. At this moment, Niet Tian smiled faintly and said, Let's make a bet. Let's bet who can break the Saint Force Forbidden Array. Whoever breaks the Forbidden Array will be the winner. The loser will be at the winner's mercy. What do you think? His calm voice contained a hint of mockery and provocation. When Su Chun heard Niet Tian's words, his eyes trembled violently and he shouted without hesitation, Deal! He did not believe that Niet Tian was an array master at all. Therefore, he was certain that he would win this bet. If he did not take such a bet, he would really be an idiot. Everyone's expression changed at the same time, and they were shocked. Niet Tian and Su Chun were betting with their lives. Teak, you're a 1-inch bastard, you're dead. Su Chun glared at Niet Tian and said with a murderous look. However, Niet Tian's face was calm, and there was no emotion in his eyes. He had 2 array masters by his side. Why would he be afraid of Su Chun? After a while, everyone calmed down and began to walk deeper into the valley. The entrance to the Sacred Realm Seed was in the deepest part of the valley. The valley was narrow and wide. After walking for a long time, the crowd finally saw the end of the valley. Soon, the crowd arrived at the end of the valley. The scene that greeted them shocked them to their core. In midair, the towering mountain walls on both sides were like 2 giants that stood between heaven and earth. The mountain walls were covered with a layer of strange black runes. The runes flowed on the mountain walls like burning black flames. What was even more strange was that there was a huge cave between the 2 mountain walls. The cave was as dark as night, and there was an extremely cold aura, as though it led to the abyss of hell. Is this the entrance to the Sacred Realm Seed? When everyone saw this, their faces were filled with shock, and their voices were trembling. This was completely different from the Saint Energy Restrictive Formation that they had expected. Niet Tian looked at the huge cave and felt a sinister aura. It was as though there was an invisible giant hand that was trying to grab him. Niet Tian, this is not an ordinary Saint Energy Restrictive Formation. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard, and there was a hint of seriousness and worry in it. What do you mean? Niet Tian furrowed his brows and asked in a low voice. I'm afraid this Sacred Realm Seed is not ordinary. Fat Cat's voice was heard again. Her eyes could not help but tremble. Watch out! Niet Tian's eyes narrowed, and he was about to ask something else when he heard Fat Cat scream. Boom! At this moment, an extremely sinister aura was suddenly released from the huge cave. Then, a huge skeletal hand appeared and reached out from the cave to grab them. At this moment, Niet Tian's expression changed, and he broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 29:81. Boom! In the huge cave that was as dark as the night, the giant skeletal hand suddenly burst out, bursting out with a majestic and terrifying aura. The skeletal hand was tens of thousands of meters long, and every single bone could be seen clearly. However, the strange thing was that the entire hand was black in color. On top of that, there were black fire runes that flowed and surged, emitting a suffocating and eerie aura. Buzz! Creak, creak, creak. Suddenly, the void suddenly sank, and there was a sound of pressure that sounded like a groan. Wherever the 5 fingers of the skeletal hand passed, the space would directly split, and cracks in time and space would appear. It was like an abyss, and in the next moment, it would devour everything. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. Many of them froze on the spot and could not move. Everyone moved back. In this moment of life and death, Qin Zhengyue remained calm. He roared and was the first to rush forward. His aura gushed out of his body and rushed towards the skeletal hand in the sky. Boom! 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 At the same time, Kuyo Anaguchi Li Jin, and the other powerhouses made their moves as well. Waves of ferocious attacks shot towards the skeletal hand like mad dragons. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Following that, a terrifying rumble sounded in the sky. Waves of violent energy spread out and wreaked havoc in the sky. The heavens and earth wailed, and the mountains crumbled. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, the skeletal hand crushed all the attacks and pressed down on the valley. Oh no! Qin Jingyue's eyes widened and he screamed. He could not hide the panic on his face. Everyone, let's attack together. In a split second, Kuyo Onaguchi roared. Following that, golden light gushed out of his body and shot towards the sky with a terrifying force. The power of this boundless golden light was shockingly the god-binding power that he had plundered from Nie Fenghua. Boom, boom, boom. Li Jin and the other powerhouses saw this, and their eyes darkened. They no longer held back and attacked. Boom, boom, boom. Following which, a series of violent attacks bombarded the giant skeletal hand. The giant black bone joint finally couldn't withstand the attacks and began to crack. Boom! Just as the skeletal hand was about to descend, it finally collapsed and turned into black flame runes that filled the sky before dissipating. After a long time, the black flame runes in the valley disappeared completely. TQR1, the crowd's eyes were dull, and they all looked like they had yet to recover from the shock. The scene just now was too terrifying. The power of the skeletal hand was beyond everyone's understanding of martial arts. At this time, the 8 strongest people present, Holy Soul Academy's Dean Kuyo Onaguchi, Abysmal Dean Li Jin, Mu Family's Patriarch Mu Xinghe, Rong Family's Patriarch Rong Tong, Yu Family's Patriarch Yuqi, Xintian Emperor Xiao Lin, Holy Moon Emperor Jing Xing, and Adjudicator Qin Jingyue. These 8 people were all injured. Furthermore, judging from their pale faces, their injuries were not light. Just now, the 8 of them had joined forces twice to barely block the giant skeletal hand. These 8 people might not be the strongest in the myriad domains, but they were definitely top-notch experts, especially Kuyo Onaguchi and Li Jin, who were already at the pinnacle. However, the 8 of them had only barely managed to block the giant skeletal hand, and all of them were even injured. The strength of the giant skeletal hand was unimaginable. Nie Tian. Just as everyone was slowly coming to their senses, a horrified voice suddenly rang out. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, and the scene that entered their eyes caused their expressions to change again. Nie Tian stood rooted to the ground, his expression blank, as if he were a piece of wood. However, his right demon eye was bleeding profusely. The blood flowed down from the corner of his eye all the way to his lower jaw, like tears of blood. Wherever the tears of blood passed, a glaring blood mark was left on Nie Tian's face. The blood mark was like a crimson curse rune, engraved on Nie Tian's face. This, everyone gasped, stunned by the scene in front of them. They had no idea what was going on. Feng Qi, what's going on? Qin Jingyue walked over and asked with a gloomy expression. I don't know either. Feng Qi shook his head and said in shock, when I sensed that something was wrong with Nie Tian, he was already in this state. Qin Jingyue frowned when he saw Nie Tian's dull expression, as if he had fallen into some kind of illusion. At this moment, Empress Xintian Xiao Lin walked over and said with a frown, "This is not an illusion. His divine consciousness seems to be controlled by some kind of terrifying power." She was someone with the blood eyes of the illusory knight, and her perception was very strong, especially when it came to illusions. She was very sure that Nie Tian was not being controlled by an illusion. Vaguely, she felt that there was an unusually terrifying mental strength in Nie Tian's divine consciousness, and it was this mental strength that was controlling Nie Tian's divine consciousness. But the strange thing was that she could not perceive where this mental strength came from. Ninth uncle, how do we wake Nie Tian up in this state? Feng Qi was worried that Nie Tian's divine consciousness would collapse, so he looked at Qin Jingyue and asked, "Don't move." Qin Jingyue frowned and said, "We can only wait. If we forcibly wake him up, I'm afraid that it will cause a great impact to his divine consciousness, and cause it to collapse. And Feng Qi nodded and looked at Nie Tian nervously. The others held their breath and did not dare to make too much noise. Oh! After a moment, Nie Tian suddenly let out a soft groan, and his dull eyes trembled slightly, then surged with a bright light. Nie Tian! Feng Qi saw that Nie Tian had woken up and shouted in surprise. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed, his face filled with great shock. Nie Tian, are you okay? Feng Qi looked at Nie Tian and asked cautiously. Qin Jingyue stopped Feng Qi and motioned the latter not to speak, to give Nie Tian some time to wake up. It seemed that Nie Tian had just experienced a terrible thing and had not yet calmed down. Ho! After a long time, Nie Tian exhaled a deep breath, and his horrified expression finally eased. But the shock in his heart could not be calmed. In that instant, he saw a pair of extremely cold and sinister evil eyes. To be more precise, it was his devil's eye that saw this pair of evil eyes. At that moment, his divine sense instantly entered a strange space. The surroundings were bone-piercingly cold, and the chill was extremely sharp. And in the center of this space was the pair of cold, evil eyes. After that, Nie Tian felt the devil's eye shed tears of blood, and his divine consciousness finally woke up. Just when Nie Tian woke up, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and said in a deep voice, "Devil's eye weeps blood." "Fat, what did you find?" Nie Tian became cold and asked with a frown. Before he saw the cold, evil eyes, Fat Cat seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. And now, Fat Cat said that the devil's eye weeps blood. What did this mean? Nie Tian, you can't enter this cave. Fat Cat did not answer Nie Tian, but said in a deep voice, "Why?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he froze. Chapter 2982. After hearing Nie Tian's words, the Fat Cat fell silent for a long time before saying, "Nie Tian, this sacred realm seed was not nurtured by the heavens and earth. It was man-made. How is that possible?" Nie Tian was stunned when he heard the Fat Cat's words. Then his expression froze, and he exclaimed in his heart, "How is that possible? The sacred realm seed was not nurtured by the heavens and earth. It was man-made." Was the Fat Cat joking? This was a sacred realm seed, something that could transform a territory into a sacred realm. What kind of person could create a sacred realm seed? Nie Tian felt that even a real sage could not create a sacred realm seed, right? Nie Tian, I'm not joking. This Saint World seed was definitely created by someone. Little Fat Cat's voice rang out again, this time with great certainty. Indeed, before he could finish his sentence, the Ghost Emperor said, "A naturally formed sacred realm seed will only be accompanied by a sacred energy formation. There will definitely be nothing else. The giant skeletal hand and the pair of evil eyes that you saw with your demon eye are definitely not things that exist in the sacred energy formation. There's only one possibility for this sacred realm seed to be so strange, and that is that it was created by someone. The giant skeletal hand and the evil eyes are both protective measures left behind by the person who created the sacred realm seed." The Ghost Emperor's voice became very low towards the end. Even though he was a peak formation master in the sacred world, he had never heard of anyone who could create a sacred realm seed. The sacred realm seed was something that could transform a territory. The person who created the sacred realm seed could be said to have created a sacred realm. Nie Tian's expression became very ugly after hearing the Ghost Emperor's words. He was momentarily speechless. Since the Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor were sure that the sacred realm seed was created by someone, there should be no doubt. However, Nie Tian could not imagine what kind of existence could create a sacred realm seed. Nie Tian, since this person was able to create the sacred world seed, it's easy to imagine how heaven-defying his strength is. He definitely won't allow others to lay their hands on the sacred seed, so he will definitely set up layers of protection. At this moment, the Fat Cat continued, "If you enter this cave, you will face unimaginable dangers." At this point, he did not continue. The Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor were equally fearful of the person who could create the sacred realm seed. They didn't have the confidence to fight against such a terrifying existence. Fat Cat had been by Nie Tian's side for so long and had accompanied Nie Tian through countless life and death situations. Fat Cat had never been afraid, but this time he was afraid. At this moment, Nie Tian's expression returned to normal. Suddenly, the light in his eyes flickered, and he asked, "Fatty, is there a difference between a seed nurtured by the world and a seed created by humans?" "There's no difference." The Fat Cat shook his head. His eyes flickered, and he felt a faint sense of unease. "If that's the case, I have to enter this cave," Nie Tian said with a plain but firm look in his eyes. The sacred world seed could help him unseal the second star mark. He urgently needed to increase his strength, so he would not give up this opportunity. "Nie Tian, you don't know the dangers behind this cave. There will be plenty of opportunities for the sacred world seed in the future. There's no need to take the risk now," the Ghost Emperor said anxiously. Before Nie Tian could speak, the Fat Cat sighed and said with a bitter smile, "Ghost Emperor, don't say any more. We can't change his decision." After following Nie Tian for so long, the Fat Cat was very familiar with Nie Tian's personality. Even if there was only a slight chance, Nie Tian would not give up. "Fat, Ghost Emperor, trust me." Nie Tian nodded slightly and said with a faint smile. His eyes were surging with domineering confidence. After experiencing countless life and death situations, Nie Tian believed that he was best at creating miracles. He grasped hope in despair and walked out of the impossible. The Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor knew that Nie Tian had made up his mind, so they did not say anything else. After calming down, Nie Tian suddenly asked, "Fat, what did you mean by the demon eye weeping blood?" "Nie Tian, the demon eye weeping blood is the reawakening of the demon eye. The first extreme demon annihilation seal has already appeared on your face," the Fat Cat said in a deep voice, and there was a hint of worry in her voice. Extreme demon annihilation seal. When Nie Tian heard this name, he suddenly felt a bloody mark on the right side of his face. It was actually burning with pain. This bloodstain was left behind after the demon I shed tears of blood. Currently, it was on Nie Tian's face, and it was extremely eye-catching, making him look extremely evil. "Fat, is this bloody mark the extreme demon annihilation seal?" Nie Tian frowned and asked with a heavy gaze. If this bloodstain continued to exist, his appearance would look very strange. "Take your 1-inch yes." The Fat Cat nodded and said, "You don't need to worry for now. The extreme demon annihilation seal will dim down in a few days. It will only be activated under certain circumstances." "Yes." Nie Tian nodded slightly and sensed the extreme demon annihilation seal. He felt an extremely strong demonic force from it. He was very familiar with this force. It was the demonic force from the extreme demon embryo. The only difference was that the demonic force from the extreme demon annihilation seal was darker and more terrifying. The powerful force from the extreme demon annihilation seal shocked Nie Tian. But right now, he didn't know what the extreme demon annihilation seal was, nor did he know how to use its power. The Fat Cat didn't say anything else but sighed in his heart. "Nie Tian, the pair of evil eyes you saw just now was definitely something terrifying, or else it wouldn't have triggered the demon eye weeping blood. This time, I really don't have the slightest confidence to be able to trigger the demon eye weeping blood and activate the extreme demon annihilation seal. The power of that pair of evil eyes was unimaginable." The worry in the Fat Cat's heart increased again. But now, he had no other choice. He could only try his best to help Nie Tian overcome this crisis. "Nie Tian, are you okay?" Feng Qi looked at Nie Tian. Seeing that the latter didn't speak for a long time, he couldn't help but ask. "I'm fine." Nie Tian faintly smiled, and his expression returned to normal. He didn't say what happened just now because he didn't want to cause chaos. And even if he did say it, nobody would believe him. In the eyes of the crowd, the person who could create the seed of the sacred world simply didn't exist. After a while, the crowd calmed down a lot. "Everyone, let's go in." Qin Jingyue inhaled deeply and said in a low voice. Though they had just experienced a shocking scene, it didn't affect the crowd's excitement. After all, The temptation of the seed of the sacred world was far too great. Qin Jingyue's gaze froze. He stepped forward and was the first to enter the cave. Chapter 2983. What's going on? Everyone saw Qin Jingyue step into the cave and disappear. They couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Everyone calm down, Kuyo Onaguchi roared. His eyes swept across the crowd, and everyone quietened down. The crowd looked at the cave, and many people subconsciously retreated. It was as if it wasn't a cave in front of them, but a monster that could devour everything. Nye Tian, this cave should be a space-time gate. Do you know where it leads to? At this moment, Little Fat Cat spoke, reminding Nye Tian. Take your 1 inch yes. Nye Tian nodded. The moment Qin Jingyue stepped into the cave, he felt a trace of space-time aura. There should be a space-time gate hidden in the cave. Only when a warrior stepped into it would the space-time gate release its aura. Go in. Nye Tian smiled faintly. Before the others could react, he stepped in and disappeared instantly. The crowd was stunned. They didn't expect Nye Tian to be so decisive. So it's a space-time gate. At this time, Su Chan suddenly laughed and said loudly, Everyone, don't panic. It's just a hidden space-time gate. When the crowd heard Su Chin's words, they suddenly quieted down. Everyone, follow me. Let's go in together. Su Chin confirmed a space-time gate and said loudly. He stepped into the cave. The others reacted and stepped in one after another. At the same time, in the depths of the Arctic snow mountain, in a huge ice valley, 2 figures stood. It was Qin Jingyue and Nye Tian. The 2 of them stepped into the cave and came to the ice valley in front of them. What puzzled them was that this huge ice valley was sealed off from all sides like a prison. Huh? Before the 2 of them could speak, a surprised voice sounded. Then, a figure appeared. It was Su Chan. What is this place? Su Chin's figure landed. Perhaps it was because he panicked, but he shouted. Nye Tian turned around and glanced at him. He didn't speak. Then, more people appeared. Not long after, everyone came to the ice valley. Everyone's silhouettes landed. The commotion lasted for a long time before it finally calmed down. However, the ice valley they were in was too strange. There were thick ice walls on all sides, and countless ice vortexes were floating above their heads, constantly releasing cold air into the surroundings. The entire ice valley was filled with a piercingly cold air. It was so cold that it seemed to be able to seep into one's bones. It's so cold. At this time, someone couldn't stand it anymore and couldn't help but say. Nye Tian furrowed his brows and looked at the frost vortex in the sky with a solemn expression. He had long sensed that the cold air in the air was intensifying bit by bit, and this cold air was released by the frost vortex. When they first arrived, they could barely withstand the cold. Still, after a moment, all martial artists below the level of demi-saint could no longer hold on. Many low-level half-saint martial artists were almost frozen into ice cubes. Without the protection of their companions, these low-level half-saint martial artists would have frozen to death. Master Su Chan, have we fallen into some killing formation? Dean Li Jin asked with a frown as he took a step forward to Su Chen's side. This ice valley was sealed off from all sides, and there was that terrifying frost vortex above their heads. It was clearly a killing formation. Su Chan shot a cold look at Li Jin as if he was very angry, but he didn't say anything. Dean Li, Master Su is trying to sense the killing formation. Let's not disturb him. Mu Xinghe, the patriarch of the Mu family, said calmly. At this time, most people's gazes were focused on Su Chan, hoping that the latter could find some clues. The cold air in this sealed ice valley was getting heavier and heavier. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before even a pseudo-saint would not be able to withstand the cold pressure. On the other side, Mu Shuijing came to Nye Tian's side and whispered, Master, I can sense a trace of the aura of a formation, but why can't I confirm it? He had already confirmed that this ice valley was indeed shrouded by a huge killing formation. However, the aura of the formation in the space was faintly discernible, making it impossible for him to accurately sense it. Master Nye Tian, I have the same feeling as Brother Mu. This formation is very strange. No matter how I try, I can't sense the exact existence of the formation. Kuwu also walked over and said with a frown, "This is a double formation. The killing formation is embedded with another formation. The two formations are perfectly fused together, concealing the aura of the formation." Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly as he said calmly, "Of course, he wasn't the one who sensed the aura of the formation. He was merely repeating the words of the fat cat. A formation within a formation." Mu Shuijing's eyes trembled violently when he heard Nietion's words. "So that's how it is." Ku was also extremely surprised. He looked at Nietion with undisguised admiration and thought to himself, "Master Nietion is indeed an unparalleled formation master. He can even sense the formation within a formation." At the same time, he glanced at Mu Shuijing and thought to himself, "Brother Mu is really lucky to be under Master Nietion's tutelage. I found it." At this moment, Su Chen's voice suddenly sounded. He was very surprised as he pointed to an ice wall and said, "This is where the formation energy converges. If I'm not wrong, this is where the eye of the formation is." When everyone heard his words, they all looked over. However, they only saw an ice wall and nothing else. Nietion's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he looked over. Sure enough, his demon eyes saw faint magical symbols swirling around the ice wall. Mu Shuijing and Kuwu looked over and exchanged glances. They said in shock, "Su Chen's attainments and formations are indeed very high. He actually found the eye of the formation." The two's perception was very strong. At the same time, they sensed the strong aura of the formation energy around the ice wall. This aura of the formation energy was the aura that they had been trying to ascertain, but were unable to. The two then looked at Nietion with awkward expressions. Su Chen was one step ahead of Nietion and found the eye of the formation first. This was something they did not expect. However, at this moment, Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. He kept turning around to look at the surrounding ice walls, his face full of surprise. Fat Cat told him that Su Chen had only found a fake eye of the formation. On the surrounding ice walls, there were a total of 99 fake eyes. They were all used to conceal the real eye of the formation. Su Chen had spent so much time and only found one fake eye of the formation. However, Fat Cat had directly identified 99 fake eyes. The difference in their attainments and formations was obvious. "Men, attack the eye of the formation with all your might." At this moment, Su Chen pointed to the fake eye of the formation and shouted loudly, "Yes!" The surrounding people were extremely excited. They all shouted yes and wanted to step forward to help. Chapter 2984. Just as everyone was about to break the formation, Nietion suddenly walked over, causing everyone to be taken aback. "You bastard, what did you say?" Immediately afterwards, Su Chen snapped out of his daze and stared fixedly at Nietion, his eyes filled with a cold light. He hated Nietion so much that he couldn't wait to tear Nietion into 1,000 pieces, burn his bones, and scatter his ashes. Now, then Nietion had suddenly jumped out and claimed that the spell formation core he had discovered was fake. How could he tolerate it? Everyone else looked at Nietion as well. Most of them were looking at him with suspicion. Though Nietion was Mu Shuijing's teacher, most people thought he was a joke. Arrays were much more difficult than alchemy and crafts. Nietion was so young, and there was no way he was an array master. "I said this array eye is fake." Nietion stared at Su Chen and coldly said, "Bullsh asterisk T." Su Chen was completely infuriated. He cursed and growled. "How can the array eye sense be fake? You are obviously afraid of losing to me and are trying to mislead everyone." As soon as he spoke, the crowd became restless. This young man, sure, is audacious. He dares to slander Master Su. Yeah, why doesn't he take a look at himself? I don't think he can even sense the slightest bit of the array's energy. I'm worried that Master Su will break the array and make him lose. This young man, sure, is evil. For a bet, he doesn't care about our lives. How despicable. Countless gazes stared at Nietion. Their words were vicious, and they thought of Nietion as a despicable person. Nietion frowned, and his expression darkened. Based on the current situation, Even if he continued to argue, no one would believe him. Tian, ignore these people. Whoever wants to die, just let them die. Fat Cat's voice rose and said angrily. I'll say it one more time. This spell core is fake. If anyone wants to die, feel free to attack. Tian's eyes narrowed as he repeated himself and retreated. Everyone looked at Tian, and when they sensed the determination in his eyes, they could not help but tremble. Oomph. Su Chun sneered and said to Mu Xinghe, the patriarch of the Mu clan, Patriarch Mu, please take action and break the killing array. This. Mu Xinghe's face stiffened. He let out a dry cough and said, Grandmaster Su, this formation core doesn't look strong. I don't think there's a need for me to do anything. Upon hearing Mu Xinghe's words, Su Chen's old face sank. He said in a cold tone, Patriarch Mu, are you suspecting this great master? I don't dare. Mu Xinghe frowned. He turned around and said to a warrior of the Mu clan behind him, Mu Lingshan, come and help Master Su break the array. Mu Lingshan was stunned for a moment, and his face looked terrible. At this moment, everyone could see that Mu Xinghe did not help, because he was suspicious. Although Tian was young, he was very strange. Everyone remembered what had happened to him before. Mu Xinghe was not sure if Tian's words were true, so he did not dare to joke around with his life. Do it. Mu Xinghe looked at Mu Lingshan and said in a cold and commanding tone, Yes. Mu Lingshan's face looked terrible, but he still nodded in agreement. As a member of the Mu clan, how could he disobey the patriarch's order? Then, everyone began to disperse. Mu Lingshan stepped forward one step. His entire body's qi exploded and filled the air. TQR 1-inch boom. In the next moment, his eyes darkened and he threw out a palm. Instantly, a violent force was released like a tsunami. It exploded with a terrifying force and rushed towards the ice wall. At the same time, the ice wall seemed to have sensed something and made a strange sound. Then, many inscriptions appeared and were released. In the blink of an eye, the coldness in the air intensified. Then, a gust of cold air gushed out and condensed into a terrifying icicle in the air. It headed straight towards Mu Lingshan with murderous intent. Crack, crack, crack. In the blink of an eye, the coldness was released and surged in the air. The surrounding space was frozen. Even Mu Lingshan's attack in the air was frozen. It was as if time had been frozen. Mu Lingshan suddenly felt something was wrong. He screamed and the fear in his eyes reached its peak. In the next second, he didn't have time to react. His entire body was frozen and his face was still full of fear. This sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to shake violently. They looked at Mu Lingshan in fear. Mu Lingshan's attack was frozen in an instant. Nobody expected this. What was going on in front of him? While everyone was still in shock, the coldness in the air slowly disappeared and returned to the ice wall. Bang! Mu Lingshan's body fell to the ground. After he landed, he shattered into pieces of ice. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The fear in their hearts was at its peak. The scene was dead silent. Grandmaster Su, what is going on? After a while, a low roar was heard. A pair of eyes stared at Su Chun angrily. It was Mu Xinghe. Mu Lingshan was a member of the Mu clan, and he was very strong. He was a 5th-rank pseudo-holy warrior. His position in the Mu clan wasn't low. He died just like that. How could Mu Xinghe not be angry? More importantly, he almost made a move just now. If he had made a move, the person who would have turned into ice would be him. If the dignified clan leader of the Mu clan died just like that, being laughed at would be a small matter. The Mu clan would definitely decline in the future. How is this possible? Su Chen's old face was stiff. Finally, he reacted. He was extremely shocked, and his face was extremely ugly. He clearly sensed that the ice wall was where the array eye was. Why did this happen? Grandmaster Su, your array skills are a mess. Mu Xinghe's face darkened, and he shouted in a low voice. He was already very patient. If someone else had caused Mu Lingshan's death, he would have made a move long ago. The gazes of the others slowly changed. They became strange, doubtful, suspicious, and even contemptuous. Su Chun, the third-ranked array master in the Myriad domain, had lost all his face today. Could it be that I was wrong? Su Chun asked in shock. His eyes were trembling, and he wanted to find a crack in the ice to hide in. I told you that what you sensed was a fake formation core. At this moment, Nie Tian's voice rang out, and he said indifferently. His voice wasn't loud, his tone was calm, and his words were ordinary. However, every sentence and every word that fell into Su Chen's ears was like a crisp slap to his face. At this moment, everyone turned to look at Nie Tian. Their previous cold, disdainful gazes were replaced by burning adoration. Even if they weren't willing to admit that Nie Tian was an array master, everything that Nie Tian said and did was irrefutable. Su Chun, look carefully. There are a total of 99 fake array eyes in this ice wall. Nie Tian smiled faintly and waved his hand. A wave of sword essence dispersed in the air and turned into 99 swords that landed on 99 different spots on the ice wall. Chapter 2985. Su Chun sensed the locations of the 99 sword rays and froze on the spot, like a block of wood. On the other side, Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu were stunned too. Their expressions were the same as Su Chen's. As for the others, they were confused as they had no idea what was going on. Apart from Su Chun, Mu Shuijing, and Ku Wu, no one else could sense the presence of the formation force. Even the other divine formation masters had no idea what the 99 sword rays meant due to their low cultivation levels. Nie Tian, what's going on? Qin Jingyue collected his thoughts and asked in a low voice as he approached Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled and said, Sir Adjudicator, I sense that there are 99 fake formation eyes in this ice valley. I'm just using the sword rays to mark out the locations of the fake formation eyes. This. Qin Jingyue was stunned for a moment before he asked in astonishment, You're saying that the locations of the sword rays are fake formation eyes? Yes. With a faint smile, Nie Tian nodded and said, In a grand spell formation, false spell formation eyes are usually used to hide the real formation eyes, and the killing intent in the false spell formation eyes is also the strongest. I see. Qin Jingyue could not help but gasp after understanding the situation. If he was the one who attacked the fake formation eyes, he would have been the one to die. TQR1 following this, his eyes narrowed as he looked at Nie Tian and asked, Mr. Nie, there are so many fake formation eyes in this ice valley. Where are the real formation eyes? I'm looking for them. Nie Tian nodded slightly. Qin Jingyue quickly nodded and felt much more at ease. Since Nie Tian was able to accurately locate the 99 fake formation eyes, it should not be difficult for him to locate the real formation eyes. At this moment, everyone's gazes were focused on Nie Tian, their eyes surging with blazing light. Now that everyone had completely lost confidence in Su Chun, the only person who could save them was Nie Tian. Master. At that instant, a cry could be heard all of a sudden. Following this, a figure dashed toward them. Everyone was stunned, and their gazes couldn't help but tremble violently when they saw that the person that charged over was actually Su Chun. Nie Tian's expression sank when he saw Su Chun rushing toward him. Thump! Just as everyone was guessing what Su Chun was going to do, he dropped to his knees in front of Nie Tian. Everyone's expressions stiffened upon seeing this, and their faces were filled with disbelief. Who would have thought that the arrogant and conceited Su Chun would actually kneel before Nie Tian in front of so many people? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked with a faint smile, What are you doing, Su Chun? Grandmaster Nie Tian, your attainments and spell formations are unparalleled, Su Chun said in a loud voice as he kowtowed to Nie Tian. I, Su Chun, am greatly impressed. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he was amused by the scene before him. This Su Chun had been itching to kill him just a moment ago, but he was now kneeling and kowtowing to him. The change in his attitude was too ridiculous. Besides, not only was Su Chun arrogant, but his flattery skills were top-notch too. Su Chun noticed that Nie Tian kept on kowtowing on the icy ground without saying a word. His forehead had turned red and swollen. Su Chun, are you admitting defeat? Nie Tian frowned and finally spoke in a cold manner. Su Chun, I'm willing to admit defeat. Suchin lifted his head and looked at Nyetian as he said in a serious tone, I'll have no complaints if Master Nyetian wants to punish me. Oh. Nyetian let out a laugh and said, Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? Suchin's expression stiffened when he sensed the coldness in Nyetian's eyes. He then said, It's my honor to die in the hands of Master Nyetian. Everyone watched from the side. Countless beasts were running wild in their hearts, and cursing was written all over their faces. No one had expected Suchin to do such a thing. Suchin, stand up. Nyetian smiled faintly and said, Your life is still useful. I'll keep it for now. Thank you, Master Nyetian. Suchin's eyes trembled. He then stood up and retreated to Nyetian's side. He bowed deeply and respectfully. He was completely flabbergasted by the 99 fake spell cores that Nyetian had found. At that moment, he knew that he was definitely no match for Nyetian. He finally understood that Mu Shuijing's request to become Nyetian's disciple was not a joke. He had truly become Mu Shuijing's disciple. He was even envious that Mu Shuijing could become Nyetian's disciple. Then, the crowd slowly quietened down. Nyetian began to search for the real array cores. As time passed, the coldness in the air became more and more intense. Nyetian felt a bone-piercing coldness that made him feel oppressed. Many cultivators could not withstand the invasion of the coldness and could only sit down and rely on the protection of their companions to barely catch their breaths. However, as the coldness in the air intensified, everyone's expressions became more and more terrible. At this rate, it would not be long before the pseudo-sacred cultivators' lives would be threatened. I can't take it anymore. At that moment, a roar suddenly sounded. A cultivator soared into the sky and flew toward the sky. Everyone suddenly raised their heads, their eyes trembling and their faces pale. That cultivator had just approached a frost vortex when his body froze for a moment and was sealed in ice. He then fell and turned into ice shards when he hit the ground. The tragic scene caused everyone's expressions to stiffen. Their eyes were filled with fear. The coldness in the frost vortex was too terrifying. Even a high-level pseudo-sacred cultivator would not be able to withstand it. Moreover, there are many frost vortexes. Even an expert like Kuyo Onaguchi would die instantly if he was invaded by the coldness in the frost vortexes. Shocked, the crowd once again fixed their eyes on Nyetian. Found it! At that moment, Nyetian's eyes lit up and he shouted in joy. Upon hearing Nyetian's voice, everyone's eyes instantly turned red and filled with burning desire as they looked at him. The array cores are in these two places. Nyetian's lips curled up into a faint smile as he pointed to two ice walls not far away. The killing formation in the ice valley was not only a formation within a formation, but also a killing formation with two array cores. Even Fat Cat and Ghost Emperor took a long time to set up such a complicated killing formation. Nyetian knew that the crowd could not hold on any longer. He looked at Kuyo Onaguchi and Li Jin and said, Deans, let's do it. Among the people present, these two were the strongest. It would be the safest if they made a move. Kuyo Onaguchi and Li Jin exchanged glances before turning to look at Nyetian at the same time. They were obviously doubtful. They had seen with their own eyes what happened to the cultivator from the Mu family who tried to break the formation. If Nyetian was wrong about the array cores, wouldn't the two of them die a horrible death? In particular, Kuyo Onaguchi was worried that Nyetian would make use of the killing formation to avenge Nyefenghua. Kuyo Onaguchi, your life belongs to my father. I won't kill you. Nyetian looked at Kuyo Onaguchi and said. Kuyo Onaguchi was stunned for a moment before he nodded his head. He believed that Nyetian would not trick him. Li Jin hesitated for a moment before he finally nodded his head. The crowd dispersed while Kuyo Onaguchi and Li Jin prepared to make their move. Boom! However, at that moment, a terrifying explosion could be heard in the sky. The crowd lifted their heads and saw a frost vortex suddenly explode, as if it had been torn apart by something terrifying. Boom! In the next instant, the void trembled as a giant frost hand appeared and grabbed at the frost vortex. Chapter 2986. Frost Giant. Fat Cat's shriek made Nye Tion's face darken. He was stunned as he looked at the giant frosty hand. This wasn't the first time Nye Tion had heard about the frost giant. Back then, when he was in the frozen ruins, he had seen the profound ice dragon pillars. Each of those huge, profound ice dragon pillars was more than 100,000 meters long, and there were giant dragons sealed within them. Fat Cat had said that the 12 frost dragon pillars were the frost giant's altars, and the giant dragons inside the pillars were the frost giant's food. Nye Tion was deeply shocked. He couldn't imagine how powerful the frost giant was. And now, he had actually encountered one. How could he not be shocked? But wasn't the frost giant a legendary existence? Why would it appear here? Kaboom! While Nye Tion was still in a state of shock, the giant frosty hand descended from the sky and grabbed hold of a frost vortex. However, the giant hand lifted up and tossed the frost vortex down like a snowball. This scene caused the eyes of the crowd to shake violently. Then, they began to scream in pain. Nye Tion's eyes narrowed as his heart sank. He knew how terrifying the frost vortex was. If the ice vortex exploded in the crowd, the cold air would be released, and at least half of the people present would be frozen into pieces. Attack the frost vortex, don't let it fall. Nye Tion reacted in the blink of an eye. With a loud roar, he was the first to make a move and unleash the star heavenly slash. Kaboom! However, before his sword could get close to the frost vortex, it was frozen and shattered in the air. The frosty aura within the vortex was so terrifying that it actually froze Nye Tion's sword intent. Attack! Qin Zhengwei reacted abruptly. He let out a loud roar and punched out. His fist was like a heaven-defying dragon, rushing towards the ice vortex. Boom! 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 In the next instant, the others also made their moves. One after another, ferocious attacks spread towards the ice vortex like raging waves. Bang, bang, bang. In the sky, terrifying sounds of explosions rang out incessantly. The space was in a state of chaos, completely filled with wild power. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. Finally, the void suddenly trembled, and the frost vortex exploded in midair. The space was instantly frozen, and countless ice flowers appeared in the air. At that moment, everyone felt the frost in the air intensify. The frost was so cold that it seemed like it was going to freeze everything in the world. Nye Tion took a deep breath and activated the 9 dragon veins in his body to disperse the frost. His martial body was strong to begin with. Coupled with the fact that the supreme dragon vein had a strong resistance to the cold and the chaotic flame in his body, his ability to resist the cold was even stronger than most low-level pseudo-sage cultivators. Look, it's coming again. But just as everyone heaved a sigh of relief, a second frost hand appeared in the sky, directly grabbed the 2 frost vortexes, and fiercely smashed down. Everyone's expression changed. They were terrified. Fortunately, Qin Jingyue and the other experts were calm and attacked the 2 frost vortexes at the same time. Eyebrows furrowed, Nye Tion turned his attention away from the ice giant. He could not help much with his strength anyway. He looked at Kuyo Onaguchi and Li Jin. They had not attacked yet. Kuyo Onaguchi, what are you waiting for? Attack! Nye Tion roared with a dark expression. Kuyo Onaguchi and Li Jin looked at each other. Their auras surged, and they were ready to attack. Boom! Boom! The next moment, the 2 of them moved at the same time. Violent energy was released and blasted at the 2 formation eyes. Boom! Boom! The terrifying energy landed on the formation eyes at the same time, causing the entire ice valley to shake. Bang! Bang! Immediately, the ice walls where the 2 spell cores were located trembled and then exploded. 2 holes appeared, and cracks spread out in all directions. Crack, crack, crack. The cracks on the ice walls spread very quickly. In the blink of an eye, they covered the entire ice valley. The grand spell formation is about to break, Nye Tion exclaimed, his eyes blazing with excitement as he looked at the cracks on the ice walls around him. Everyone, let's attack together and destroy this killing formation. Right at this moment, Su Qin's voice sounded out, and he shouted with pleasant surprise. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone reacted and simultaneously attacked the surrounding ice walls. Immediately, the entire ice valley began to crumble. Nietion looked up at the sky. The two frost vortexes exploded, and a terrifying chill spread in the air, freezing the space. However, at this time, the cold air was no longer a threat to them. The entire formation had already collapsed beyond recognition, and the cold air was no longer as dense as before. In the space, lines of runes circulated, but they were already broken, like fallen leaves in a gale. Boom, boom, boom. The ice walls began to collapse, and the space became clear. Everyone was overjoyed. Their faces were filled with the joy of surviving a disaster. However, Nietion looked up at the sky with a strange expression. He realized that the pair of frost hands had disappeared. The frost vortexes were also disappearing. The way they disappeared was very strange. It was as if they had disappeared into the space. What's going on? Nietion was very confused and puzzled. Where did the frost giant go? Why did the frost vortexes disappear? At that moment, Nietion's eyes narrowed. He saw a figure flash in the sky. How is this possible? His eyes narrowed, and his expression was one of shock. He was very sure that it was not an illusion. A figure had appeared in the void, but disappeared in an instant. However, he could not understand why a person would appear here. Could it be that someone had arrived before them? Or the figure that disappeared in a flash was the person who created the seed of the sacred world? Thinking of this, Nietion's eyes darkened and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. If the person who created the seed of the sacred world was still alive, he would be a terrifying existence. While Nietion was still bewildered, the grand spell formation completely shattered. TQR1, the surrounding ice walls collapsed and disappeared. The space became vast. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. They were actually on a boundless ice field. The cold wind was like a knife, and the frost was like a knife. Looking around, it was a boundless ice field. What is this place? Everyone was shocked. They broke through the killing array and came out of the ice valley. It was as if they had come from a small cage to a bigger cage. Nietion was also shocked. It was as if they had come to a different world. Nietion. At that moment, Su Chun suddenly came to Nietion's side. His face was filled with panic and his voice was trembling. Did you hear that voice? Nietion frowned and his expression changed. Chapter 29:87. Hearing Fat Cat scream, Nietion's face darkened. Boom! At that moment, the ice surface in the distance suddenly shook, as if there was a giant beast charging at them. What is that thing? The others also noticed that something was wrong and couldn't help but cry out in horror. Boom! 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 At this moment, the surrounding ice began to shake. Then it cracked and crumbled. It looked as if there was a huge force beneath the ice, forcefully pushing it open. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them, and they could not help but move closer to each other. Oh no, it's a single-horned ice snake. Just then, Fat Cat's voice rang out again. TQR 1-inch boom. As soon as Fat Cat's voice fell, the ice surface in the distance exploded, and a giant beast rushed out of it. Its huge body shattered the ice within a few thousand meters. Nietion's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. The giant beast was a giant snake. Its body was more than 1,000 meters long, and its body was covered with a layer of icicle-like scales. On the head of the snake, there was a giant horn that was 100 meters long. This is a single-horned ice snake, Nietion exclaimed in his heart. Single-horned ice snakes have been extinct since ancient times. Why would they appear here? What is this place? Fat Cat's scream rang out again, and he seemed to be in a panic. Boom! 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 At the same time, the surrounding ice surface exploded, and one after another, single-horned ice snakes appeared. They surrounded the group and charged at them in a frenzy. Nietion felt the aura of the single-horned ice snakes, and his face darkened. He estimated that the strength of a single-horned ice snake was comparable to a human pseudo-sage. Boom! At that moment, a single-horned ice snake charged at them, and its ferocious aura filled the air. Several weaker martial artists did not know what was going on, and they were directly turned into ice cubes. Following which, the rest of the one-horned ice snakes charged at Zhang Xian. Screams of agony filled the air. Everyone, don't panic. Stick together. Right at this moment, Qin Jingyue's voice sounded out. Everyone came to their senses, and the weak gathered around the strong. Boom, boom, boom. Immediately, many pseudo-saint experts began to counterattack. Waves of violent attacks crashed into the void, blocking the first wave of attacks from the horned ice snake. Niet Tian slashed out with his sword and retreated to the middle of the crowd. He was temporarily safe. However, on the outskirts of the crowd, dozens of experts were fighting the horned ice snakes. The single-horned ice snake's body was extremely tough. Even an expert like Kuyo Onaguchi would have to go all out to kill a single-horned ice snake. With the help of Kuyo Onaguchi and the other powerhouses, everyone was relatively safe. However, Nietian could see that the ice in the distance was still cracking, and more horned ice snakes were charging towards them. At this rate, Kuyo Onaguchi and the others would not be able to hold on for long. What should I do? Nietian frowned, his brain working at top speed. Nietian. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly sounded. Elder Hua. Nietian saw the face that suddenly appeared in front of him, and his eyes could not help but heat up. Before entering the Arctic snow mountain, Hua Yiru had said that he had a plan to let Nietian obtain the Sacred World Seed. However, what happened next was beyond Nietian's expectations. He felt that Hua Yiru would not have guessed that the Sacred World Seed of the Arctic snow mountain was created by someone, so Hua Yiru's previous plan might not work. Now that Hua Yiru had taken the initiative to look for him, he might bring him a pleasant surprise. Nietian, we must find the Frost Fiend altar. Hua Yiru looked at Nietian and said in a deep voice. Frost Fiend altar? Nietian was stunned. He had no idea what Hua Yiru was talking about. Look at this. Hua Yiru took out a map scroll, opened it, and handed it to Nietian. Nietian looked at the map in front of him, and his eyes narrowed. He did not expect that Hua Yiru would have a map of the Arctic snow mountain. The Sacred World Seed is born from the Frost Fiend altar. As long as we can find the Frost Fiend altar, we can find the Sacred World Seed. Hua Yiru did not explain much and said hurriedly. He pointed at a bright spot on the map and said, the location of the Frost Fiend altar is here, but I have not been able to determine where it is. Nietian frowned and looked at the map with a heavy gaze. To be honest, he could not understand the map at all. How could he understand a map that even Hua Yiru could not understand? Nietian, this is a map from the immemorial era. The location of the Frost Fiend altar should be nearby. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded in surprise. Nietian frowned and looked around. As far as his eyes could see, it was a boundless ice field. Where was the altar? Since the Frost Fiend altar could nurture the Sacred World Seed, the scale of the altar should be very large. However, the ice field was vast and boundless, and there was no sign of the altar. Ghost Emperor, are you sure? Nietian's face was gloomy as he asked in a deep voice. Although this map is very old, it is nothing to me. I am very sure that the Frost Fiend altar is within a few tens of thousands of meters from here. The Ghost Emperor replied with absolute certainty. This? Nietian frowned, and his expression froze for a moment. Since the Ghost Emperor was so sure that the Frost Fiend altar was nearby, it should be right. However, there was nothing in the surroundings. This was very strange. The single-horned ice snake is an immemorial beast. Looking at the size of these single-horned ice snakes, they should be adults. Why are they so weak? At this moment, the fat cat's voice suddenly sounded. Weak? Nietian frowned, and his face darkened. In his opinion, these single-horned ice snakes were comparable to human pseudo-sages. They were already very strong. How could the fat cat say that they were weak? Strange. Why are these giant snakes getting stronger and stronger? At this moment, a martial artist suddenly shouted, his face filled with shock. Eh? Nietian's eyes narrowed as he used his divine sense to investigate. His expression became strange. He discovered that the aura of the single-horned ice snakes was indeed much stronger than before. What's going on? He frowned, a look of surprise on his face. I know. Immediately, the fat cat seemed to have discovered something and shouted in surprise. Fat, what do you know? Nietion's eyes lit up as he asked anxiously. These single-horned ice snakes have just awakened, the fat cat said excitedly. Their strength is slowly awakening, and they will soon reach their peak state. This? Nietion's face stiffened as he asked in shock. How strong are the single-horned ice snakes at their peak state? They are comparable to human pseudo-sages. The fat cat replied, and then said, but that is not important. What is important is, where did these single-horned ice snakes awaken from? Chapter 2988. In an instant, Nietion understood, and his eyes blazed. The fat cat's meaning was simple. The single-horned ice serpents had just awakened, so they must have been in a frozen state before. Where would they be sealed in ice? Without a doubt, in the frost fiend altar. The single-horned ice serpents appeared from under the ice, so the frost fiend altar must be under the ice. No wonder the ghost emperor said the frost fiend altar was nearby, but Nietion couldn't find it. It turned out that the altar was under the ice. Nietion, are you sure the frost fiend altar is under the ice? Huairu looked at Nietion and asked in surprise. I'm sure. Nietion nodded heavily. However, the problem they were facing now was how to enter the ice. Nietion, if this emperor's senses aren't wrong, we're currently within the protective formation of the frigid fiend altar. As long as we break the formation core, the frigid fiend altar will naturally appear. The ghost emperor's voice was filled with excitement. It's the array again. Nietion's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't sense any aura of array power. Nietion, this protective array is hidden between heaven and earth. Even a sane array master wouldn't be able to sense any aura of array power, the ghost emperor said solemnly. Then what do we do? Nietion was stunned. Didn't this mean that even the ghost emperor and the fat cat couldn't find the array core? Nietion, whether we can find the array core or not depends on you. The ghost emperor said solemnly. Before entering here, your demonic, I felt a strange aura, and you even saw a pair of evil eyes. I'm guessing that you're demonic. I should have a special reaction to the frost fiend altar. Therefore, whether we can find the array core or not depends on your demonic eye. Nietion's face sank, and he nodded slightly. He had a lot of questions in his heart, but he could only suppress them in his heart for now. Once he left this place alive, he would naturally know everything. Right now, he had to find the array core of the altar's protective array as soon as possible. Right at this moment, a blood-curdling scream rang out, and a bloody light appeared in the air. Nietion followed the sound and saw a martial artist being killed by a single horned ice serpent. That martial artist had the strength of a 5th-rank false saint, but he was killed by the single-horned ice snake. This meant that the single-horned ice snake was slowly recovering its strength. If he waited for the horned ice serpent to recover to its peak state, Nietion and the others would be dead. According to Fat Cat, the single-horned ice snake at its peak had the combat power of a peak false saint. Among those present, there were only a handful of peak false saint experts. However, there were tens of thousands of single-horned ice snakes in front of him. That was equivalent to tens of thousands of peak false saints. Just thinking about it was terrifying. The fact that the demonic chill altar could release so many single-horned ice serpents showed how terrifying this altar was. Next, Nietion focused his mind and began to use his demonic eye to sense his surroundings. However, as time slowly passed, he did not sense anything. There was nothing unusual in the surrounding space. Calm down, calm down, calm down. Nietion took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. At this time, the more flustered he was, the more troublesome it would be. These giant serpents are getting more and more powerful. We can't stop them. At this time, a voice sounded, and then a figure rushed into the sky, wanting to leave. Nietion frowned and looked at the person. It was the Rong family's patriarch, Rong Tong. Obviously, Rong Tong wanted to leave the others behind and save his own life. This, However, at this time, a single-horned ice serpent rushed up against the sky, opened its huge mouth, and pounced toward Rongtung. Bastard, you're courting death. Rongtung was very fierce. With a low roar, he directly slammed his palm down. The terrifying palm force condensed into a huge palm shadow in the air and smashed down toward the single-horned ice serpent. Boom! Boom! As the palm shadow fell, the space suddenly shook, and then the giant horn of the single-horned ice serpent was shattered. The huge body of the single-horned ice serpent trembled and directly fell. At this moment, Nietian suddenly saw a black light appear on the belly of the single-horned ice serpent. This discovery caused him to frown involuntarily. The array core is on the body of the single-horned ice serpent. In the next moment, he suddenly understood and shouted in surprise. The moment the black light appeared on the belly of the single-horned ice serpent, Nietian faintly felt a trace of array energy fluctuation. He immediately confirmed that the array core was on the body of the single-horned ice serpent. The person who designed the array was very smart. He hid the array core on the body of the single-horned ice serpent, which was equivalent to the array core being mobile. This made it harder to find. In the blink of an eye, Nietian came to a realization and praised himself excitedly. I'm a genius. However, at this time, more single-horned ice serpents appeared in the air, and all of them attacked Rongtung. Nietian did not care about Rongtung. Instead, he quickly observed each of the single-horned ice serpents. His demon eye swept across, and the black light in each of the single-horned ice serpents was very obvious. TQR1 soon, he confirmed that this was a smaller single-horned ice serpent. The black light in its body was very obvious, and its aura was much stronger than the other serpents. That's it. Nietian stared at the single-horned ice serpent and shouted with a burning gaze. Boom! In the next moment, the corner of his mouth twitched into a smile. Then he stabbed out with his sword. The sword ray was like an arrow released from a bow, enveloping the ice serpent. Of course, this sword was not meant to kill the ice serpent, but to leave a mark on its body. The sword's shadow fell, and the sword ray surged. A surge of sword intent lingered on the ice serpent for a moment before disappearing. When the others saw this, they were puzzled, not knowing what Nietian was doing. Nietian knew that his strength was limited and that he could not kill the ice serpent. So he shouted, Lord Adjudicator, this ice serpent is the array core. Kill it. Okay. Qin Jingyue's eyes lit up as he reacted. He stamped his foot and rushed toward the ice serpent. At this moment, the surrounding single-horned ice serpents reacted. More than a dozen of them moved at the same time, charging toward Qin Jingyue. Cover the Adjudicator. At the same time, Kuyo Anaguchi and Li Jin's voices rang out at the same time. The two of them attacked at the same time, and the rolling waves of energy crashed into the space and blocked the dozen ice serpents. Die! In the next moment, Qin Jingyue slammed his palm down in midair, causing the void to tremble. Suddenly, a palm shadow appeared, suppressing the ice serpent with earth-shattering force. Boom! The palm shadow fell, and before the array ice snake could react, it was hit directly. Its huge body suddenly trembled and then collapsed. Nietian saw the black light in the ice serpent's body turn into black runes that were instantly torn apart and dissipated into the air. Bam! 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 As the ice serpent was killed, the other single-horned ice serpents began to explode in the air. These single-horned ice serpents were array runes. The black light in their bodies was formed by the array runes. When the ice serpent was killed, the protective array collapsed. Naturally, the ice serpent could not survive and shattered in the air. When the crowd saw this, they could not help but be stunned. They had no idea what had happened. Rumble. At this moment, the ice on the ground shook violently and began to shatter on a large scale. Chapter 2989. Nietian looked up into the sky, only to see a pair of giant frost hands appearing as far as his eyes could see. A frost giant. His eyes trembled in an instant as he exclaimed in his mind, That pair of giant frost hands was none other than the ones that had appeared in the Ice Valley killing formation before, the hands of a frost giant. It was only then that Tian could clearly see the pair of giant frost hands. To be precise, it was not a pair of real hands, but merely the shadow of a pair of giant hands. What was even more bizarre was that there was only the shadow of the giant hands, as if a colossal body was hidden behind them. Is that really a frost giant? Tian could not help but wonder. Boom! At that very moment, the pair of giant frost hands suddenly pressed down, and an endless chill spread out as countless ice blades appeared in the air. Everyone's expression changed as they saw the scene, and they were extremely shocked. At the same time, the ice surface below was collapsing as if there was a bottomless abyss below. "Everyone, run down!" Tian reacted quickly and yelled. His body moved as astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he dove down. Bang, bang, bang. However, many martial artists who did not react in time were directly frozen by the giant frost hands and turned into ice shards in the air. Tian's figure fell, and the space around him was filled with ice blades. He activated the astral soul shield and barely managed to protect himself. Some of the weaker martial artists were instantly killed by the ice blades that filled the sky. Tian was worried about Hua Iru's safety, but his expression froze when he saw the latter. Flames were raging around Hua Iru's body, and the ice blades around him could not even get close to him. What was even more bizarre was that Hua Iru's strength was no longer that of a first-stage demi-saint, but that of a ninth-stage demi-saint. How was that possible? Tian was stunned by the scene before him, and his face was filled with disbelief. What did Hua Iru do to suddenly turn from first-stage demi-saint to a ninth-stage demi-saint? Could Hua Iru have been hiding his strength all along? Boom! Just as Tian was in a state of shock, the aura of the giant frost hand in the sky suddenly surged. Space itself became extremely heavy, as if it was about to be frozen by the cold chi. Oh no! Tian's expression changed, and he cursed inwardly. If the space was frozen, everyone would be frozen. Then, when the giant frost hand fell, everyone would be instantly killed. I'll take this palm. The corner of Hua Iru's mouth twitched. Then, he suddenly soared into the sky. The flames on his body became violent in an instant, forming a sea of fire in the sky. Elder Hua. Seeing this, Tian couldn't help but cry out in shock. He had never imagined that Hua Iru would actually take the profound ice giant's palm head-on. The power of this palm was even stronger than the giant skeletal hand that Tian and the others had encountered in the huge cave. Could Hua Iru withstand it? Kuyo Anaguchi was also stunned by Hua Iru's action, and his face was filled with shock and horror. Of course, he knew Hua Iru, but he absolutely didn't expect Hua Iru's strength to be so strong. Judging from the aura alone, Hua Iru was even stronger than him. He had long noticed that Hua Iru and Tian had an unusual relationship. He was very curious about Hua Iru's relationship with Tian. At this moment, the strength that Hua Iru had displayed shocked him, made him wary, and even made him feel fear. He had a vague premonition that Tian must have an extremely terrifying identity. When the others saw Hua Iru rushing over, their eyes trembled, and they were extremely shocked. Boom! At this moment, the giant frost hand fell, landing on the sea of fire around Hua Iru. The space around him shook, as if it was about to be torn apart in an instant. Boom, boom, boom. Following this, wild waves surged high up in the sky, and terrifying power surged in all directions. The cold air and the flames clashed, causing the entire sky and earth to groan. Seeing this scene, everyone's eyes trembled violently, and their faces were filled with indescribable shock. Hua Iru actually blocked the mystic ice giant's palm. Bang! However, at this moment, a dull sound was heard, and Hua Iru's figure swayed for a moment before directly falling from the sky. Elder Hua! Tian's eyes narrowed, and he screamed in shock. Following this, he rushed over, and all the strength in his body surged, and he steadily supported Hua Iru, The two figures slowly descended and stood in midair. Elder Hua, are you all right? Nyetian looked at Hua Iru and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Hua Iru let out a deep breath, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, but he laughed and said, This mystic ice giant's soul is indeed powerful. Nyetian's brow furrowed, and his expression stiffened. He originally thought that the giant frost hand in the sky was the real mystic ice giant. TQR 1-inch, the mystic ice giant, is a primordial great saint. If it was the real mystic ice giant, how could I possibly block this palm? Hua Iru said with a faint smile, knowing what Nyetian was thinking. Elder Hua, what is going on? Nyetian frowned and asked in a deep voice. Don't worry, you'll find out soon. Hua Iru smiled and then looked up into the sky. At this moment, everyone also calmed down, and one by one, they looked up into the sky. The turbid waves in the sky slowly dissipated, and a huge altar appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, everyone was in an incomparably huge abyss, and the huge altar was suspended in midair. The altar was tens of thousands of meters wide, and the outermost layer was surrounded by 12 huge ice pillars, and in the middle of the ice pillars was a huge platform. The huge platform extended out of the abyss like a giant hand reaching into the sky. And above the platform, there was a huge whirlpool with a radius of a few thousand meters. The whirlpool was extremely fast, and it continuously released the aura of saint energy in all directions. The seed of the sacred world. Seeing the huge whirlpool, everyone immediately understood that it was the seed of the sacred world. Hua Iru was right. The seed of the sacred world was nurtured by the cold fiend altar before them. Nyetian, look outside the altar. Just as Nyetian was in shock, Hua Iru's voice was heard. Nyetian's eyes narrowed, and then he immediately widened his vision, and his expression immediately froze. Outside the altar, there was an incomparably huge shadow shrouding it. This shadow was the mystic ice giant. The cold fiend altar was actually inside the body of the mystic ice giant. The cold fiend altar was tens of thousands of meters wide, but it was shrouded by the mystic ice giant. One could imagine the size of the mystic ice giant's body. The soul of the mystic ice giant. This is the last defense of the cold fiend altar. Hua Iru's expression was very calm, and he said with a faint smile, As long as the soul of the mystic ice giant was destroyed, the seed of the sacred world would be exposed. However, the soul of the mystic ice giant was so powerful. How could they destroy it? I didn't expect that you would actually be able to find the cold fiend altar. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out in the sky. It was calm and extremely real. Immediately, a figure appeared on the platform of the cold fiend altar. Chapter 2990. A figure suddenly appeared on the Tao platform of the frigid fiend altar, causing everyone's eyes to shudder violently, and their expressions to turn sluggish. Who would have thought that someone could directly enter the fiendish frost altar? Hua Iru's eyes narrowed when he saw the figure on the altar. It was obvious that he had not expected someone to appear on the fiendish frost altar. At this moment, Nyetian frowned and exclaimed, It's that guy. He then looked at the figure. Previously, in the Ice Valley Killing Formation, the pair of frost hands had appeared, and a figure had disappeared in a flash. Nyetian had noticed the figure at that time. He had even guessed that the figure was most likely the creator of the Sacred World Seed. At this moment, the figure unexpectedly appeared again. However, in the next moment, Nyetian's expression froze as soon as he saw the face of the figure. The face belonged to someone he was familiar with. Nyetian, you shouldn't have come. At this moment, the figure on the altar spoke. His eyes were emotionless as he looked at Nyetian coldly and called out his name. How could it be you? Nyetian's expression stiffened for a few seconds before he finally reacted. He called out a name with a trembling voice. Emo. Emo. Nyetian would never have thought that the person standing on the platform at this moment would be Emo, a member of the frigid ghost wings whom he had once saved. TQR 1-inch Nyetian, I also didn't expect you to come here, Emo said with a cold expression. He said again, You shouldn't have come." His coldness was not oppressive at all. Instead, it was a kind of emotionless indifference. At this moment, everyone else was flabbergasted, their eyes flickering between Nyetian and Emo. Who would have thought that Nyetian would know the person who had suddenly appeared on the altar? After a while, Nyetian finally calmed down and asked, "Emo, why are you here?" He remembered that the last time he and Emo separated, the latter had clearly taken Nyetian to the Four Strange Regions. Why did he appear here? "Nyetian, you don't know yet, do you? The Arctic Snow Mountain is the ancestral land of the Fiend Wings race," Emo said coldly. "The altar you're looking at right now was left behind by the ancestors of the Baleful Wings clan. This sacred world seed was nurtured from the fiendish frost altar." Nyetian's face stiffened when he heard Emo's words. He was speechless for a long time. How could he have imagined that the Arctic Snow Mountain was the ancestral land of the Fiend Wings race? At this moment, Hua Iru suddenly laughed. He shook his head and said, "No wonder the baleful frost altar just had to give birth to a saint's world at a time like this after not producing a saint's world seed in the past few million years. So the people of the baleful Frostwing clan have appeared." With that, he looked at Emo and said, "If I've guessed correctly, it was you who activated the fiendish ice altar, which allowed the saint's world seed to appear." "Yes." Emo did not deny it. He nodded slightly and said, "I didn't think that when the saint's world seed appeared, there would be such a huge fluctuation of saint power. It actually alarmed the entire Sacred Soul region." Huairu was right. It was Emo who activated the fiendish ice altar, which was why the saint's world seed was born. Emo's previous trip to the Four Strange Regions was actually to prepare for the activation of the fiendish ice altar and search for something. I know that the fiendish ice altar is protected by the profound ice giant soul, but I didn't think that a member of the Baleful Wings race would appear. Huairu sighed and couldn't help but shake his head. Huairu had long been paying attention to the Arctic Snow Mountain. Before he found Nyetian, he had already begun to look for something that could unlock the star-marked Dark Seal. That was why he could arrange for Nyetian to obtain the Heavenly Meteorite Stone. He had long known that the fiendish ice altar in the Arctic Snow Mountain could breed a Saint's World seed. He had been waiting for so many years, but he didn't think that a member of the Baleful Wings race would appear. The Baleful Wings race was a true descendant of the sacred race. Huairu was very familiar with the fiendish ice altar and had already thought of how to break through the profound ice giant soul. However, Emo's appearance had exceeded his expectations. His understanding of the fiendish ice altar was obviously not deeper than Emo's. Moreover, as a member of the Baleful Wings race, how could Emo allow someone else to obtain the Saint's World seed? "I'm also very surprised that you were able to come here." Emo spoke coldly and then said, "But that's not important. Whether you appear or not doesn't affect me." "Is that so?" Huairu frowned and then laughed. "You want to use the Saint's World seed to activate the fiendish ice blood scroll, right?" Emo's expression changed when he heard Huairu's words. He didn't think that Huairu would know about the fiendish ice blood scroll. The fiendish ice blood scroll was the Baleful Wings race's holy book. It recorded the Baleful Wings race's greatest secret. Emo activated the fiendish ice altar to use the Saint's World seed to unlock the seal on the fiendish ice blood scroll. He wanted to revive the Baleful Wings race, and activating the fiendish ice blood scroll was the first step. The fiendish ice blood scroll is a taboo book in the sacred world. Do you know the power that seals the fiendish ice blood scroll? Huairu looked at Emo and asked, "I know what the price is. I don't need you to remind me." Emo replied coldly as he looked at Huairu. "The fiendish ice blood scroll is sealed by the polar ice seal. Once it is activated, the power of the polar ice seal will be released. When that happens, the entire sacred soul realm will be frozen by the polar ice seal. Everyone below the half-sage will die." Huairu looked at Emo and said solemnly, "Have you really thought about this price?" The polar ice seal was a sage-level seal. Its power was beyond imagination. It could freeze the entire sacred soul realm in an instant. Moreover, everyone below the half-sage in the sacred soul realm could not withstand the impact of the polar ice seal and would die instantly. There were definitely hundreds of billions of people below the half-sage in the sacred soul realm. The price that EMO had to pay for activating the fiendish ice blood scroll was hundreds of billions of lives. Do you want to stop me? Emo's eyes darkened as he asked in a cold tone. What do you think? Huairu's face darkened slightly, but his gaze was firm. Even if it wasn't for the sacred world seed, he couldn't let EMO kill hundreds of billions of people. With just you guys? Emo's face darkened, and he said coldly, You can't even break the profound ice giant soul. What right do you have to stop me? He had to activate the fiendish ice blood scroll, no matter what price he had to pay. The fiendish ice altar was protected by the profound ice giant soul. He believed that aside from a true sage, no one could break the profound ice giant soul. If you only rely on the profound ice giant soul, then I can tell you that you can't activate the fiendish ice blood scroll. Huairu smiled faintly, but his eyes were filled with cold intent. Emo looked at Huairu and couldn't help but sneer. Do you think you can break the profound ice giant soul just because you blocked a palm strike from the profound ice giant soul? Do you think I've used my true strength? Huairu also smiled, then looked at Nietian and said indifferently, Nietian, I want to borrow your Hellfire Crucible. Hellfire Crucible. Nietian's eyes narrowed, and his expression changed. The Hellfire Crucible was something that existed in the third layer of the galaxy. Previously, the number 1 emissary, Li Guangchen, had said that the heaven-shrouding totem was his original spirit, and that he had used it before.